Chapter 1995. Actually, this guy named Shura was quite interesting. If you were to fight with Mu Sung-Yuan's group alone, the latter's group will be done for. Shura had calculated everything and made use of the information that Mu Sung-Yuan's group did not know about to set up a huge trap. He used a power that was absolutely irresistible to Mu Sung-Yuan's group, who barged into the tranquil wasteland alone to control everything. He wanted them to fall into the well and die instantly without any accidents. However, he did not expect a group of unreasonable people to appear out of nowhere. They were like a few big shots who could easily collapse the void when they sneaked in during an exchange. Of course, it was not a big deal to sneak in with a group of big shots who could easily collapse the void. But in the end, this group of big shots did not do anything but put on an act. They put on an act until both sides believed that they were really talking about something else. Suddenly, they jumped out and spread their hands, saying, "Hey, I'm not playing anymore. I'm not pretending anymore. I've been waiting for this moment." In fact, Shura was a little wronged. He did not do anything wrong. Whether it was holding him hostage or talking to him about those things along the way, Shura did not believe much of what he said about joining the demonized life form. What he believed most was the power he had in his hands. From the beginning, Shura had used all his strength to restrain him, fearing that he would cause any trouble. This was the evidence. Now, looking at the hundreds of millions of troops, this was Shura's confidence, power, and dream. This was the source of his fanaticism and confidence. It was not something that could be instigated with just a few words. It did not exist. It was just that he probably did not expect that the person he was holding down was not a weak guy, but a supernova of the void and order class. If he dared to put such an unstable explosive in his pocket, it would be easy for him to get into trouble, just like now. Anyway, he was an explosive. He admitted it. But this time, it was none of his business. Everyone had given the order to lock him down. So what could he do? He could only get someone else to do it. Little Green, get your weapons. Let's fight. Boom. The moment he finished speaking, a ray of light suddenly descended from the sky and landed on the platform, exploding into a huge energy storm. It was as if a torrent of energy had landed in front of them. The sudden explosion shocked Mu Sung-Yuan and Shura, but in fact, it was not a torrent of energy thrown out by a guy. It was just... He looked and saw little Qing walking out. That was his entrance. When he smashed down from the sky, he was wrapped in a huge amount of energy. The impact of his landing caused the green crystal ground to shake, and it looked like it was about to crack. The moment little Greenie came out, a meteor shower fell from the sky. Objects trailing energy flames fell from the sky. The dazzling white light at the front of the objects made them look like clusters of energy containing extremely rich energy. A few seconds later, they fell from the sky perpendicular to the ground like meteors. Boom, dong, dong, dong. Like a continuous saturated bombardment, the meteors whizzed past, drawing a circle with them as the center and fiercely smashing into the huge circular platform. Some fell on the bottom layer, the middle layer, and the upper layer. The huge energy explosion was accompanied by a dazzling white light, blinding everyone who was watching the explosion. In the white light, they could vaguely see the demonized people and creatures gathered in all directions being lifted up by the energy impact of various colors. They were sent flying high into the air by the invisible shock waves of the explosions, and then torn to pieces by the energy impact from all directions. It was as if the leaves of a tree had tacitly fallen off and scattered unevenly in all directions, quickly withering in the air. As a group of meteors fell in a straight line and slammed into the ground, the power of the meteor shower was not weaker than a saturated bombardment of energy. The demonized people and creatures that surrounded the platform had lost their formation, and alignment. They were scattered everywhere, unable to find their bearings, and many of them were missing arms and legs. The power of order in this world was a little weak, and it was the same for their individual strength. After all, they were all life forms that were born quickly, and it was inevitable that they would be tagged with a lot of prefixes and suffixes. However, The demonized life forms seemed to have made up for the lack of individual combat strength, and their combat strength was much stronger than normal life forms. Of course, judging from their level, it was the pot calling the kettle black. It was the same for their defensive strength as well. After a round of justice descending from the heavens smashed this place into smithereens, there were less than 1,000 of them who were actually annihilated in an instant. There is no need to mention the demonized life forms, as they were just a bunch of small fries. Azura and Hai, who were sent flying by the shockwave, did not suffer any serious injuries. They had just rolled far away like gourds. At this moment, they hurriedly stood up from the ground, gripped their weapons, and instantly entered battle mode. Their gazes swept across Yun Nuashing, who had slightly opened her arms and a smile on her beautiful face. Then, their gazes stopped at the balls of light that had smashed the dozen or so floors of the platform. Those balls of light gradually lost their light, and then a large group of figures wearing strange clothes walked out. After they walked out, they looked in all directions, and all of them revealed a slightly sick and sinister smile. A joint aura violently erupted, causing Azura and the others to be extremely shocked and at a loss at the same time. They did not understand what was going on. I Ching, who was the first to appear, immediately waved his hand and shouted at the entire space. "Everyone, attack at will. Apart from the new generation of energy towers, you can use anything you want. The guys who are guarding the top of the mountain, remember to cover this place with a lid. I'm not just asking you to cover the bottom. I want you to seal off this place with a radius of tens of billions of miles. I've temporarily divided the second echelon. I'll leave those noisy black things on the top floor to you guys. If you feel that the firepower is not enough, adjust the number of energy towers. Damn it, this is not the Abyss Death Mist manifestation, and you're actually talking to me about the problem of injuries? Are you trying to make Lord Feng and Lord Hui laugh themselves to death, and then inherit the void frontline? No, you can't just throw a wall out with a flick of your hand. The concept of this world is on the verge of collapse. You're here to cause trouble, aren't you? The rest of you go. Everyone here have been flattened by it. If you can kill them with one slap, don't hold back. If you can't kill them with 2 slaps, catch them. That's definitely a big fish. TSK, TSK, TSK. Look at the scene of explosions all over the world. These gorgeous fireworks, this colorful world. I already said that even if I don't do anything, cough, cough, I'm not the only explosive. Look at everyone who's made a grand appearance. Which one of them isn't an explosive? How can the commotion they cause be any smaller than his? Look at the collapse of the sky and the cracking of the earth. Look at the commotion caused by the platform being torn down. There's a guy who punched a demonized person and a mountain wall flat. He even overturned a group of demonized life forms on the top floor. Yin Nuashing glanced at everyone. Hui, see you Blue Phoenix, Shuang Shuang, and the others were also shouting slogans and rushing up to fight. They were randomly looking for people to play with. Now, only Shura and that High of the Heavenly God were left in front of him. Oh, a group of friends follow behind him, such as Mu Tsongyuan and the others, Fei Cui and Lu Xiaoqiu. They were all watching the show. Looking at their expressions, the degree of stupefaction was definitely not lighter than the demonized people who were being smashed by justice from the heavens. You're still quite calm. Yin Nuashing maintained a charming smile on his face. He crossed his arms and stroked his hair with his right hand while looking at Shura. The latter's face was green at this moment. He stared at Yin Nuashing. His black and golden eyes were rolling with a raging anger that could burn the world. He gritted his teeth and looked ferocious, wanting to swallow Yin Nuashing alive. It was the extent of his green face that made Yin Nuashing a little laugh. Even the light emitted by the green crystals at the bottom of the platform could not suppress the green on their faces. It seemed that they were really angry. Although Yin Nuashing had just said that Shura probably treated his words as farts and might not believe a word of it, it seemed that Shura did more or less believe a little just now. Yin Nuashing thought that his acting just now was quite good. Therefore, Yin Nuashing's face was 10,000 times more green than before. In fact, Shura could not be blamed for this. According to common sense, there were about 20 beginner yuanshi with 3 ultimate masters of source. Under normal circumstances, this place was surrounded by hundreds of millions of demonized people, countless demonized people, and fortress-like great demons. With such a heavy military force guarding this place, Yin Nuoxing could win even if he casually threw out his cards. But who would have thought that this group of people would directly flip the table? Moreover, they killed their way into the enemy's formation as if they were taking a stroll in the park. Most importantly, Yin Nuoxing brought them here personally. Yin Nuoxing's mistake was to believe in a guy who was not human. The guy with an unprecedented strong sense of confusion really made everyone feel that he was weak, pitiful, and helpless at first glance. Cricket was an ultimate master of source. He must be helpless in the battle of yuanshi. But in fact, it was hard to say. Yin Nuoxing had not yet seen Yin Nuoxing make a move. He only saw the continuous explosions around him. Those are the sounds of others tearing down the house. In fact, Yin Nuoxing's hands were tied because no one gave him a chance to make a move. He could only stand there and watch, staring at Shura and the leader of the sea. His colorful eyes casually looked at them disdainfully, as if he was asking them, "What else can you do now? What? Don't you want to move a little?" Yin Nuoxing was a little impatient from being stared at. He waved his hand, feeling a little like he wanted to respond. He wanted to rush up and press him to the ground to beat him up. The scene of great wind and great waves beside him was too intense. Yin Nuoxing's hands were itching. "Don't you plan to do something?" Countless years of arrangements, countless years of careful planning. You should have prepared something, right? You should at least give me a little surprise, right? I've been waiting here all this time. If you don't do something... He raised his head and looked at the battle in other places. Although the demonized people were a little stronger, they were still too weak under the rampage of the Order Warriors. The torrents of energy were like millions of flowing arrows, covering the entire area and bombarding indiscriminately. The demonized people guarding here did not even know what hit them. Now, more than half of them were dead or injured, and some of them were also captured. Sigh, with the standards of Little Qing Zi and the others, how many of them could survive 2 slaps? Master Feng. I Ching took a break from the busy work and came to Feng Luo's side. First, he looked at his companions who were all shocked, speechless. Then, he looked at Shura and the others who were staring at him. After thinking for a while, he ignored the latter's report and said, "Previously, when we were fighting outside the capital of God, we had already wiped out a considerable number of them. Now that they have escaped back here, even if they have gathered together, it is no different from a large group of people." Yin Nuoxing looked at him very gloomily. "Why don't you let me do it openly? I will use the Nihility Order origin, and there will not be many left here. It is clean and convenient. The whole battle will only last for 10 seconds. This you have to ask Master Hui and the others." I Ching laughed dryly and quickly turned to look at Shura and the others. "The remaining 2 are the leaders of the other side? Should we catch them?" Yin Nuoxing put one hand on her waist and sighed. "I am waiting for him to give me a surprise, but now he is just like an idiot. Other than staring at me with those eyes, he is not moving at all. It is making me feel very awkward." Boom! The gigantic golden fireworks in the sky symbolized a powerful energy explosion. The fortress-shaped great demons were annihilated by the energy fireworks. Those that were only hit by the energy shockwaves fell from the sky while emitting thick smoke, smashing into the ground and kicking up black dust. The demonized energy was also dissipating bit by bit. Who are you?" Yin Nuoxing, who had been stunned by the fireworks for a long time, finally reacted. However, the moment they spoke, the words that came out of their mouths made Yin Nuoxing feel a little troubled. "I'm just me. Even if I tell you who I am, you will not know who I am." Yin Nuoxing crossed her arms and raised her chin. "Compared to who I am and what I am doing, shouldn't you immediately think about what you should do now? Your compatriots are being attacked. Your soldiers are dying one by one under our torrent. The wave of demonic energy is gradually being devoured by an even greater torrent. If you just watch, then there will be nothing left for you." He saw that Shura was still stunned and silent. Suddenly, He spread his hands and laughed. What? You really don't want to do anything? I have been waiting for you to resist, waiting for you to do something that will surprise me. This is an extremely rare situation for me. I have been holding myself back, constantly emphasizing that I will give you hope, give you some time, give you some opportunity, and let you struggle for some way to turn the situation around. If you just stand here and do nothing, the situation will not get better. There are some things that you will not know the result if you don't try, right? Let me tell you the truth. That is, in the words I said to you before, other than joining the demonic life forms, everything else is true. I really want to come here, and I really want to know what you are doing. The energy, surging movement in the surroundings was coming to an end. Other than a group of people on the top who were still cleaning up the demonic life forms that were gathering from all directions, the demonic life forms on the platform had been reduced to a defeated army. Under the rampage of this group of explosives, the brave and fearless demonic life forms resisted bitterly for 10 minutes and were defeated without any suspense. In the end, there were only a dozen or so captives who were tied up into a group and thrown into the pit. After the Order warriors threw the captives here, they bowed to him and ran to the top to violently beat up the demonic life forms. It seemed that they were not satisfied yet and urgently needed to continue pouring out their strength. Ha! Ha! After a long time, Shura finally heard some other movement. He suddenly covered his head and laughed. His laughter gradually intensified and became crazier, as if he was about to go crazy after receiving too much stimulation. Our demonic life forms have been preparing for countless years. Because of the arrival of a group of inexplicable people, all of it has turned into bubbles. Ha! Yin Nuashing listened to his defeated lines and dug his ears. Are you not going to resist? You really don't want this opportunity? Seeing that you have led the way for us, I can still give you a way out at this time. There are still a dozen or so people left here. It's okay if you take them back. Really, don't you want to think about it? He smiled and shrugged. He casually picked up the captive who had just been captured and threw him at Shura's feet. I'm still very sincere, and I won't play any tricks. If you still want to resist, then try your best to resist. If you don't want to resist, I will now. Resist? Of course. I never said that it would end like this. Shura suddenly widened his eyes. His golden pupils emitted a burning golden light. He suddenly retreated and rushed to the crack behind him. He threw himself into the black and white energy light. A low growl came from his throat. Suddenly, monstrous demonic energy burst out from his body, making the entire energy light beam look more violent. The light beam shone brightly, and a gust of energy suddenly swept out from it. A violent tremor came from the tranquil wasteland. It was like the violent tremor after the ruins were destroyed. The earth shook, but it was not as violent as imagined. The demonic energy that was floating in the entire space suddenly rushed over here uncontrollably. It was as if a huge crack had opened up at the bottom of the sea. At this moment, the seawater was being sucked into the crack. The demonized beings that were still being beaten up on the top of the platform all disintegrated when this suction force appeared. They exploded into a cloud of dense demonic energy on the spot. All the Order warriors who were fighting hard were stunned. Their gazes followed the direction where the demonic energy was surging across the sky and finally landed on the big pit. After thinking for a while, they came to a realization. Maybe Lord Maple is doing something? In the sky, thousands of black energy torrents crossed the sky like black ribbons fluttering in the wind. As they kept getting closer, they merged step by step. Finally, they gathered into a dozen or so energy torrents that fell into the big pit. They fell toward the black and white light beam and washed over Shura's body. Oh, is he going to transform? Hui and the others who had sensed the abnormality could not help but exclaim when they saw the scene. This guy has finally been driven mad by Lord Maple. What an unlucky kid. I knew this would happen from the beginning. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes at him. What are you thinking? He is not transforming. Look carefully. He reached out and pointed at the bottom of the circular crack. All the energy has gathered into the crack that is gushing out. He has reversed the direction of the crack that was gushing out energy. Now, it is being sucked in by the storm. Shuang Shuang suddenly pulled him and pointed to the front. The remaining dozen or so demonic life forms were being stimulated by the rampaging demonic energy. They tore off the restraints on their bodies and stood in front of them in Shura. They looked like they were about to fight to the death. Those captives, oh, I threw them over. When everyone was speechless, Hui waved his hand to show that he was used to it. Lord Maple's mental attack. Do you think that everything will be fine after you return the captives? In fact, it is just a mental stimulation. If he does not stimulate them for a while, he is afraid that they will not be able to go berserk completely. Look, this kid must be mad now. What is he doing? Everyone was speechless. You're also very powerful to be able to understand what he meant. All the demonic life forms on the field are gone. Ning Fei dragged Gu Zhoming down from the top and shrugged. Not a single one is left. They have all turned into demonic energy and are gathering inside. Look outside. There is nothing left. I guess the whole tranquil wasteland is like this. Not long after they finished talking, the Order warriors who were in charge of cleaning up also landed at the bottom. They stood around them and stared at Shura, who was doing something unknown. They assumed a posture to let the energy continue to surge, guarding against any accidents. That these people and you guys, Emerald was still in a daze and couldn't react at all. Even if she regained her senses, she was still in a daze. She looked at the powerful warriors around her and was shocked and scared. Then, she looked at Shura, who looked even more terrifying and didn't know what he was doing. Are we really not going to stop him? Stop what? It was not easy for me to induce him to go berserk. If I stop him now, how am I going to reason with him? Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. Induce him? Mu Tsungyuan and the others also tried to recover, but they had not been in contact with Feng Ling and the others for a long time, so it was even harder for them to recover. At this moment, they could only ask in a daze. Induce. Do you want him to do something? Of course. Yin Nuoxing nodded slightly and turned to look at the energy beam that was getting more and more violent under Shura's provocation. The big crack buried at the bottom was also becoming more and more unstable at this moment. Let him do something that perhaps only demonized beings can do. If just killing him can achieve our goal, we don't have to work so hard from the beginning. Obviously, if we want to achieve other goals now, it's best to let him do it himself. Lu Xiaoqiu suddenly reacted. Could it be that you guys have been watching him from the beginning? Well, no. We shook his head. He appeared in front of us, so he was targeted. But that's not all. All the demonized people who have appeared in front of us have been targeted. Because we don't know which one is the real important person, we have to keep an eye on them. Whoever wants to cause trouble will be found. Look, we found this guy called Shura. Looking at him, strategizing and planning, we can tell at a glance that he must have done a lot of things. The rest is to guide him crazily. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes at him. Can't you do this next time? I really don't think it's fun. We looked at him and couldn't help but click his tongue. He turned to the others and said, let me tell you guys, this guy has driven so many poor children crazy before. Now he's here pretending to be painful. Yin Nuoxing hit him on the head with her hand and rolled her eyes. I think you were the one who first suggested inducing, right? But you were the one who carried it out from the beginning, and you were the one who agreed to it. Come, let me show you the scene at the beginning. Hui coughed lightly and took a deep breath. He crossed his arms and said in a calm tone, inducing is interesting. Let's do it this way. Let them personally deliver their hidden secrets to us. It's really fun. You see, that's what you said at the beginning. I still remember the original words. Yin Nuoxing, everyone. This calm tone and the sneering from time to time made him sound like a bad guy. While they were talking casually, Shura had been tossing and turning there for a while. The crack had swallowed countless demonic energy. As the core, he was still able to hold on. However, there were many cracks on his body, which made Yin Nuoxing think more highly of him. He was too familiar with hanging himself in the center of the energy torrent and letting the endless energy torrent wash over him. He often did this. Shura suddenly lowered his head and looked at Yin Nuoxing. Maybe it was too late now. This group of inexplicable people had given him the heaviest blow to the head. His head was still buzzing at this time. Only now did he realize that everything they had done, all their plans and all their situations had been torn to pieces by this group of people who had descended from the sky. If he stayed here now, he would just continue to put on a farce. Right now, it was his last chance to escape. Although he didn't know why Yin Nuashing and the others wanted to let him go so obviously, he didn't have time to think about it at this time. He still had a lot of things to do. Where there's life, there's hope. Maybe there's a chance to start all over again. Maybe there's no chance anymore. He had no idea what kind of place that domain was. Originally, he didn't think of using such a method to force his way in. They weren't fully prepared yet, but at this moment, he had no other choice. For the time being, I'll treat your thoughts and actions as ridicule. Although I don't know why you deliberately let us go, I'll remember this, Shura said in a deep voice. Azura said in a deep voice. This was the first time he had seen Azura with such an ugly expression. Last time, when he was ganged up on by them, he was not like this. He looked like he had picked up something on the road and eaten it. You'll regret letting us go. I promise. Shura's body turned into demonic energy little by little in front of everyone's eyes, as if he had melted into the light beam. The remaining demonized people also turned into demonic energy and quickly disappeared into the light beam. His eyes were locked with Yin Nuashing's. Until now, he still didn't feel the slightest bit of concern from her expression. It was as if she didn't care about what he did. He couldn't help but laugh. I hope you can still be so indifferent the next time we meet. Next time, I'll let the demonic energy cover the entire world. Don't even think about escaping. Are you going to leave or not? If you continue to nag and refuse to leave, I'll send you on your way. Yin Nuashing condensed her energy longbow with a look of disgust. Just as she was about to draw the bow and arrow, Shura completely melted into the light beam and disappeared along with all the other demonized people. Seeing this, he couldn't help but smack his lips. You're just running away, yet you're still nagging. Can't you see that the atmosphere is quieter? Chapter 1996. The pit in the center of the quiet wasteland had turned from a funnel into a bumpy mountain after being bombarded by a meteor shower. Only the platform and mountain walls at the bottom of the wasteland were still tenacious. The platform above had turned into powder and drifted in the wind. The green shimmer emitted by the powder made the space hazy like a dream. It would be better if there was no thick dark cloud in the sky. Around the crater, about 70% to 80% of the demonized energy in the inner circle of the wasteland had been absorbed by the crack. The activity of the demonized energy in the inner circle of the wasteland had obviously dropped to a relatively low level. At this time, even if they removed the protective measures left by Shura and turned off the energy barrier, it would not have much impact on Emerald and the others. In other words, the concentration of the demonized energy in the center of the wasteland had dropped to almost the same level as the outer circle. As the demonized clan left with their army, the place suddenly quieted down. I Ching arranged for some people to continue searching for the ruins in the wasteland and brought the remaining people to stand guard around casually, waiting for Lord Feng and Lord Huey's next instructions. At this time, they were surrounding the remaining black and white energy beam in the big pit. Its light was already very dim. The blocks that were originally used to support the crack and embedded in the mountain wall were accidentally torn apart by them, and a part of them was taken away. Without the support of energy, the crack would close at any time, and the light beam would be extinguished at any time. The crack seems to be closing. See, you pulled Little Star along as they stood at the edge of the Rift Valley and looked down. The crack in the center of the circular platform was a rift valley that was more than 10 meters wide. It seemed to have been split open by a sword. Looking down at the bottom of the rift valley, one could clearly see a grayish-white crack that was perhaps only half a meter wide. It was as if space was treated as a piece of paper, and a hole was poked in the middle and then torn to both sides to form a crack. The scene reflected in the center of the crack was gray and blurry. Whether it was the crack or the energy beam, they could not understand it for a while. The crack itself did not have much spatial power. It was probably the influence of the environment on the other side, or it could be the influence of the concept. They could not teleport in this world. If they wanted to teleport, they had to use a method that they had not figured out yet. If this crack was considered a teleportation, it could only be a method that they had not figured out. Of course, it was also possible that they had not figured out some simple connections and could not connect the dots. As for the black and white light beam, it was the energy from the other side of the space. It was probably the energy of the environment on the other side. It was different from the demonic energy, and they could not explore it for the time being. See, you tilted her head. Wouldn't it be better if we went over together? Not so good. Yun Nuashing shook his head. When they passed through the crack, there was a movement that only happens when a large amount of energy is consumed or annihilated in a short period of time. We can't see it here, so the movement and the vision should be on the other side of the space. It means that they have consumed an extremely large amount of energy when they pass through. We speculate that they sacrificed the demonic life forms to force the door open. I guess many of the demonic life forms that just poured in have been consumed. Obviously, Shura did not intend to do so at first. He wanted to open the door by other means, and then drag an entire army in, probably for safety reasons. Looking at it now, it's obviously not a good place. I'm not going to barge in. I've been wandering around aimlessly these days and bumping into some damn space. Yin Nuashing muttered to himself. Then he slowly spread out his right hand and took out a magic circle about a foot in size. So this thing needs a scout. Hui glanced at the colorful magic circle in his hand and suddenly realized. You left an energy mark on him. Seeing Feng nodding, he could not help but smile bitterly. You're so bad. I thought you were just forcing him to jump into the pit and wait until we meet again in the future. Huh? Why do you think I'll just let him go? Yin Nuashing glared at Hui as if he was looking at an idiot. God knows what will happen after he gets out of our sight. Do you really think letting him go means letting him live in seclusion? Do you think he's a protected animal? Let him go and let him fly. Of course, you have to keep a trump card. If it's not enough, I'll leave another one. If it's not enough, I'll leave another one. I'll leave 7 or 8 arms and legs to prepare for all aspects. I'll track them at a fixed point. I don't care if the sky collapses or the earth shatters or the void is annihilated. I'll just stay here and observe the situation. With a scout rushing in, I'll let him fly slowly. If something happens, I'll take the blame. Feng, you're so bad. You weren't like this in the past. When you first induced someone, you kept provoking him until he became stupid and crazy. He directly rushed up and died together with you. Oh, I didn't know that. Although we don't take the initiative to cause trouble, it doesn't mean that I can't increase my talent first. Moreover, as for the inducement, Yin Nuashing coughed lightly and said slowly, the inducement is also very simple. In short, you can't kill them all at once. If the opponent can still fight, you should first reduce his strength, and if he can still move, you should torture his spirit. You must make him feel despair and numb, but you can't oppress him to the point that he feels hopeless. Sigh, that is very likely to make him lose his mind and pounce on you, or even kill himself. Some people who are determined to die can't be stopped. You must leave a gap, like a gap in a flood, so that he can burst out hope and continuously squeeze out his own potential. Everyone has the desire to live, and in a life and death situation, it will increase without limit. As long as it is not a situation of certain death, you can definitely find a way that you think will work. Regardless of whether it will work or not, you must definitely try it. At this time, you'll find a lot of trump cards that you don't even know whether they are trump cards or not. After hearing this, everyone looked at each other and quickly took a step back. Cherish your life and stay away from the observer. This guy is evil to the core. Although he usually doesn't take the initiative to cause trouble and is only passive, regardless of whether he is active or passive, once he causes trouble, he will definitely kill people. Hui shivered. Feng, you've changed. You weren't so evil before. You become so skilled now. Seeing that everyone was staring at him as if they were looking at some kind of void disaster, Yin Nuashing shrunk his neck and laughed dryly. He quickly turned his head. Anyway, that's what I mean. Cough, cough, I'm going to do it. The multicolored energy circle slowly rotated in his hand, and the energy in his body began to surge. Along with the aura of the source of origin, He smashed the circle in his hand into the space in front of him. Come, world, open up. Show me the world you have seen. Bang. Before the circle could reach the space with his arm, it exploded and turned into a large pile of fragments that suddenly scattered. Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened. Everyone else was also stunned and didn't know what happened. Is it over? Hui walked closer and saw Feng's stunned expression. He couldn't help but scratch his head. What's going on? This. A drop of sweat fell from Yin Nuoxing's pretty face. His body tensed up and he turned his head stiffly. The energy mark has been destroyed. Isn't this very awkward? Huey's eyes widened and he scratched his head. What's going on? I saw that you had a card up your sleeve. Why did it explode just like that? Isn't it really going to live in seclusion now? This is, I don't know. The energy mark just came out of its cocoon and that. Yin Nuoxing wiped the sweat on his face with his hand and hurriedly added, although it exploded. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 8 hands were all heavily damaged, but that wasn't the end. The moment the mark exploded, I still caught something. There is indeed a space on the other side of the crack, but it's not perfect. I haven't figured out the rules yet. The energy aura on the other side is all this energy. He pointed to the black and white light beam that had shrunk to 1/10 of its original size. Then, I also found the same energy aura coming from another place. It's at, Yin Nuoxing muttered and thought for a while. Then, she slowly pointed to the north. Over there, over at Radiance. Fei Zui identified the direction and exclaimed softly. Then, she hurriedly looked at Mu Tsungyin and the others and said with a little excitement, Is there anything strange over there? It's strange. At the mention of the radiant light region, Mu Tsungyin pondered for a while and shook his head. There are only some ruins from the previous generation in a non-chaotic, demonic wilderness. We've explored most of them, so there's nothing particularly noteworthy. Could it be that it's actually not in the glow, but just happens to be in the north? After all, we've previously explored another area in the north, haven't we? But if that's the case, then it's even more troublesome. Fei Zui couldn't help but mutter while playing with her fingers. Radiance is your place, so you're more familiar with it. If you have to cross to another place, it's so troublesome. Yin Nuoxing pulled her hair and thought for a while. Then, she raised her hand and condensed a part of the remaining black and white energy. She kneaded it into a ball and integrated the power of source origin into it. Then, she threw it into the sky with all her strength. Before it reached the dark clouds, it turned into a ring of energy that exploded and spread to the end of the world. Soon, it melted into the space and turned into an invisible wind that blew away. Everyone who sensed the faint energy movement turned their heads. They only caught a glimpse of a ring of energy sweeping past. After thinking for a while, their eyes fell on Yin Nuoxing at the same time. Yin Nuoxing thought for 2 or 3 minutes before she slowly opened her eyes and let out a long breath. Now, I have 2 pieces of news. Hui immediately reached out and stopped her. Regardless of whether it's good or bad, tell me both at the same time. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a while and raised his hand to point at the black and white pillar of light in front of him. This thing exists in tens of thousands of places all over the world. The extent of the horizontal and horizontal crossing is estimated to cross tens of millions of regions. Everyone was speechless. Huey's face immediately turned green when he heard this. Don't tell me, this is actually just the beginning or something? I don't know. Yin Nuoxing crossed her arms and forced a bitter smile on her pretty face. She looked up at the energy beam that had dimmed to the thickness of an arm. Then, she looked down and saw that the crack was only the size of a palm. Since there are so many of these things, it's not something that exists alone. I think it should be an entrance. Well, an entrance or something like that. It's connected to another space, but, well, you can just think of it as a collapsed tunnel. When you go through it, you'll need to use a lot of energy to get rid of the gravel on the road. This is the situation that I've concluded for the time being. Look, didn't someone say that the demonized clan has existed since a long time ago? Then, judging from a situation of the 2 generations of demonized clan, Perhaps the previous generation and the 2 generations of demonized clan have never been active in the open. They all hide in dark and cramped places. Hundreds of people gather together happily, lowering their heads and constantly muttering great cause, dream, and our long-cherished wish. Then, with a whoosh, fireworks are lit. It's either rumbling or ringing, and the whole world begins to beat the beat and run towards death. Then, when you turn your head to look, there's not a single bystander because they're all doing things in desolate places and they don't want anyone to know it all. They're all leisurely thousands of miles away, and suddenly they encounter all kinds of natural disasters, and the whole city is dumbfounded. Everyone was speechless. This statement was a bit of a picture. They had almost imagined the whole scene in their minds. Hui held his head with a headache. I can't figure out what the hell is going on. Everyone, just give me a quick death. I can't stand it anymore. Lu Xiaoqiu heard him and looked at him with a strange look. But for tens of millions of years, they have been fighting against the demonized beings like this. Although there was a little episode before the sky fell, you wouldn't say that you can't stand it, right? Hui smiled bitterly. Well, they didn't know where they came from and what they were going to do. Fighting against the demonized beings was a dangerous but normal daily life for them, a world that staged daily resistance. They wouldn't suddenly say that they couldn't stand it anymore. Well, but they knew. What did they know? He didn't know. Anyway, he felt that he was going to get dizzy. Speaking of which, they hadn't been here for long. Why did it feel like almost 7 or 8 years had passed? Probably because when they were tossing about origin and creation in the void frontline, a few days passed in a blink of an eye. But here, they were either rushing or busy from morning to night. It felt like their lives had been lengthened a lot. Other than that, these things were all linked together. After running one round, they looked up and found that there was another round. If this world was a planet, then it must have 10,000 star rings. That scene was simply Yin Nuoxing looked at Hui, who had suddenly entered some kind of imaginary state. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. Looking past him, she looked at the black and white light beam that was about to completely dissipate in the air. She frowned slightly. If this thing was really the entrance that the demonized race had opened in order to go to that place, as he thought, he felt that it was necessary to verify it now. As soon as the thought appeared in his mind, he dashed out with a whoosh and fell into the valley before anyone could react. Looking at the crack that was only as thick as a finger, he took out the rhythm of light and used the power he had inherited from the Netheruin sword to stab at it. Clang! The sound of the energy explosion startled everyone who was about to rush over. Arcs of energy erupted from the bottom of the Rift Valley. The chaotic energy swept across the green platform like dozens of long whips, tearing the ladder into pieces. The Rift Valley was also forcibly widened under the influence of this force. Rocks kept falling, and all kinds of sounds were entangled together like a symphony. The energy explosion lasted for about 10 seconds and suddenly dissipated. Yin Nuoxing's figure jumped up from below. She looked at the people who ran up and shook her head. It's resisted. As I thought, there's no way to go in. Isn't that bad? Hui rubbed his forehead and was distressed. Even if we know that there are tens of thousands of entrances and exits, it's the same as not being able to go in. What's the problem? Problem? Of course, it's the condition. Yin Nuoxing turned back to look at the Rift Valley, frowning slightly and sighing. I've tried to use the demonic energy to open the rift, but it didn't even bother with me. I reckon that this should be an entrance specially reserved for the demonic life forms, and the rest are naturally not for other people to disturb. Sigh. When encountering such a conditional event, what else can we do other than find a way to fulfill this condition? We snapped his fingers. For example, you're best at demolishing. Well, I've done some calculations. To demolish this thing, it's almost equivalent to completely destroying a certain concept in the conceptual layer. Then forget it. Hui immediately smiled bitterly and waved his hand. He could not help but sigh bitterly. After all, it's a Yuanshi realm life form. Even if the Yuanshi realm in this world is fast, the power is not enough, the order is not too good, but it's still a genuine Yuanshi realm life form. It has the power it should have. doing something to the conceptual layer of the rules, borrowing the power of the concepts, and so on is a piece of cake. This is also their home world. If they chisel the walls of their house and link the load-bearing wall with other things, would these outsiders dare to have any objections? Even if they blew up their own home, the group of outsiders could only hold watermelons and durians and mourn for them, unless the explosion blew up on their heads. Forget it. Let's think about what to do in these 2 days. Yin Nuashing knocked on her head and felt a little troubled. This time, there's no way out. Camouflage can't be disguised as a demonic life form. It looks like it on the surface, but in essence, it won't work. Then what should we do now? We glanced around the big pit that was left with nothing left. He turned to look at Fei Tsui and the others. Is there any follow-up plan? By the way, the situation has become like this. Do you have any other backup plans? This is... Mu Songyuan smiled bitterly and scratched his head. His face was dull and naive. We didn't think about what to do when things became like this. We just planned to take advantage of the time when they were attacking the city to tear down as much of the ruins as possible to create some trouble for Shura and the others. They didn't expect that they would tear down everything in the quiet wasteland. Speaking of this, he couldn't help but frown slightly. By the way, why did you let him run away in the end? If you captured him or killed him directly, wouldn't it reduce more trouble? There's a reason for this, but I don't know how to explain it to you clearly for a while. Because there's no result now, the plan to lure him to reveal the truth has been ruined because of the interference of this broken concept layer. It's hard to say. Yin Nuashing pulled her hair and felt a little distressed. After thinking for a while, she decided to continue to guide them. Come, I'll ask you some questions. Think about it and answer. If you can answer clearly, you should be able to figure it out. It's known that after becoming a demonized race, one's mind will be changed in this way and that way. Then, suppose you're a demonized life form. Mu Songyuan thought for a while. Assist the expansion of the chaos devil wilderness and infect this world with demonized energy, just as Shura has always emphasized. Then, in order to achieve this goal, based on what you know of Shura's past conditions, the things left behind by the demonized race, the characteristics of demonized life forms, and this door, what are you going to do? Mu Songyuan and the others frowned fiercely. This was too divergent. It seemed like they could do anything, but it also seemed like they couldn't do anything. They weren't demonized races, so how could they know what to do? Lon Lon didn't seem to think too much and blurted out, "We don't know, but they will do things that only they know." Yin Nuashing shrugged. Congratulations on saying the answer. What we're looking for is this only they know thing. You have to solve this matter to be considered finished. In order to prevent some things from reviving, we have to cut the weeds and dig up the roots. Otherwise, more demonized people may jump out in the future. So, we have to solve the root cause. So, what you're looking for is something that can be called the root cause. Mu Songyuan also understood. But what if they don't have any methods? Then, do you think he would run for his life just now? Look at Shura's desperation just now. Although I did my best to let him go, if he really felt that he was at the end of the road and had no hope at all, do you think he would run or rush up to fight me? Everyone suddenly understood. Since he was running away with all his might, there must be something else. However, there were also other situations. In other words, if he just wanted to stay alive, he wouldn't be afraid of running out of firewood. Then, the next time we see him, we'll just strangle him to death. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. He ran away without any follow-up preparations. Even if he ran all over the world, he would still be running away. The energy beacons he left behind would be enough for me to find him and beat him up again. But from the looks of it now, it's obviously not an ordinary escape. He was prepared to escape, although the price he paid would probably make him feel the pain for a while. He shrugged. Anyway, this matter has come to an end for the time being. For the time being, we can stay in the tranquil wasteland and continue to explore the ruins. We can also go back and report. Well, anyway, let's look for the ruins first. That's why we're here. When everyone was about to disperse, Feng Qing Huang, who always liked to stand behind Little Star and rarely spoke in front of others, suddenly spoke. Where did the demonized race of the past go? Everyone was startled when they took a step forward. They all stopped and looked at each other. Yin Nuoxing and the others all looked at Mu, Tsungyuan, and Fei Cui. The latter quickly shook her head, her ponytail swinging behind her. I don't know. There are no records of the demonized race in history. Didn't you say before that the end of the two eras was a real generation gap? They probably didn't appear in the previous two eras, so there are no records of them at all. Although I don't think they were destroyed in the destruction of the previous eras. After all, the ones that were destroyed were not demonized. Mu Tsungyuan scratched his head in distress. But there's no such thing as a lifespan in the original realm unless the demonized race has a lifespan limit or they never came out from the beginning to the end, so that even the Shura of this generation has never seen them before. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Hui said and turned to look at the crack. Of course, it's also possible that they all went to that place and couldn't come out again. You see, there's so many things that look like exits in the world. It's very likely that they are holes made by the demonized race of different eras. That's what I mean. Yin Nuoxing also thought a question. How did the Shura become a demonized race? Tens of thousands of years ago, when he swarmed into the chaos wasteland. This is very likely, but we don't have any evidence, so we can only guess. Mu Tsungyuan smiled bitterly. Yin Nuoxing continued to frown. But if that's the case, why would he choose to become a demonized race? Is his brain damaged? I don't think so. Could it be an accident? Ugh, there's still a lot of things that we don't understand. It's really troublesome to trace back the cause. The higher beings had a purpose. Although this thing's directivity was very strong, there were too many targets that could be identified, and they had to be screened one by one. God knows what purpose they had to join the demonized race. Could it be that they had all taken things too hard? In fact, they didn't know that they had joined the demonized race. They just suddenly rushed in and found that not only did they not die, but their strength had also skyrocketed. However, after becoming a demonized race, they could no longer return to the normal world. They could only wander around the chaos wasteland all day long. Finally, one day they saw a relic. The mysterious relic revealed the truth of the world to them, and they resolutely embarked on this path. I'll omit a few million words later. You're so specific. It's as if you've experienced it yourself. We could not help but complain. Yin Nuoxing grinned and said in the soul transmission, I've seen a guy who had a similar experience before. I just happened to think of it. And then, he was killed by the people in his own world. Everyone was speechless. What was this? Chapter 1997. A person with a law entanglement point. Perhaps in many worlds, there would be many impressive and resounding titles, glorified as a favor or blessing, but this thing itself was a basic existence in the world. A world would have one, and a small world with its own world core would also have one. In terms of rank, the former was obviously superior. It could be that Underpants suddenly fell from the sky and was inexplicably selected, or it could be that this thing was just a small rock on the side of the road and completely unnoticeable. There was no limit to what it could be, and what it could be was basically up to the world's own choice. After all, it was its law entanglement point. As for how the world itself thought, well, it was actually very simple. It did not think about anything, and everything happened randomly. Even if divine grace really made someone a law entanglement point, it was nothing more than a random event. Of course, unless there was some void-class disaster, the world would probably take a series of emergency measures to save itself and would obviously interfere with everything within it. Still, it was a pity that it could not do anything directly and could only interfere and guide, allowing everything to develop in a direction that was beneficial to the world's survival and survival. Unless the world itself developed a true consciousness and did not only follow rules and concepts to carry out a series of automatic actions that had been arranged since ancient times. With a consciousness, a world would have variables, and not just a change in the direction of its activities, but also because it had officially become a life that could move on its own. It did not have to rely entirely on the power of the world's life to change the world, and could dress itself up. Well, actually, the movement of a world's dressing up was quite huge, and it might suddenly change to another system on a whim, and then mix 200 or 300 systems together. In a small world, perhaps it would change the landscape or something. The law entanglement point. To be honest, this was just like being an origin inheritor. You would think that it was a blessing, a great responsibility, or a shortcut to becoming a god. No, it was actually a test, a calamity, and a symbol of bad luck. At any rate, that was how it was for him. He had been chosen for no reason at all. Just hearing about it made him feel quite unlucky, just like that unlucky young man who had a law entanglement point and died in his own world. A long, long time ago. If I keep going, I won't even finish drinking a whole lake of tea. I'll keep it simple since it's just a digression. Yun Nuashing coughed dryly and began to narrate, speaking quickly through soul communication. A long, long time ago, a calamity caused by the activity of the void itself dragged a world group into the range of the calamity. It was a story of trillions of lives fleeing for their lives and competing against the void in speed and power, while the world itself followed the survival instinct built into the concept of rules to save itself. In one of those worlds, a young lad had prematurely stumbled upon the calamity and was chosen as the rule entanglement. Ordinary void calamities usually lasted for a long time, a reprieve. That's not right. It was an ongoing event where everyone could see the world itself being executed every day. Everyone could see that all rules and phenomena were ignored as the world was eroded, with everything happening simultaneously and happening every moment, every day, and every month. For example, one night when they looked up at the stars, they realized that the stars and the distant stars had been extinguished at some unknown point in time. Although those stars might have been extinguished many years ago, their radiance was still reflected in their eyes, and therefore still existed for the time being. However, the advent of the void calamity ended that phenomenon prematurely, with the light and phenomena of the stars that had reached the end of their lifespan being devoured by the void. When ordinary void calamities occurred, life would have a long time to save themselves and save themselves. For those who had yet to challenge the void, the period before their world was completely executed would be their final struggle and the most dazzling moment. Usually, dazzling was just a term used in writing, and it could be described in any way pleasing to the ears, but in reality, it was nothing but a joke. In the face of a calamity, a reprieve, and a visible void-level calamity at that, the world was being eroded and destroyed, and death was approaching bit by bit. In such a world, a bunch of lunatics, fools, the incurable, the suicidal, the troublemakers, and those who wreaked havoc all over the world. It's those fellows. In fact, with their own natures, challenging the void was just a matter of a foot in the door, and there was still time if they struggled as hard as they could to get past it. That young boy did indeed do so, struggling and acting for this world. Day after day, year after year, he gathered those who still held hope in this chaotic world, fighting, resisting. It was almost a script that all life would play out in the face of a void-level calamity. Yin Nuashing breathed a long sigh. Then, after about 2,000 or 3,000 years, when the void calamity was about to engulf their world, they successfully broke through the void seal. Congratulations, congratulations. We felt that something was not right. What happened after that? Didn't you say that they were screwed to death? Oh, those who still held hope and fought in that world were only 100% left. It was a little over 11, still a little over 10. Then what about the rest? They were all screwed, and their heads were full of useless fools. The power they gathered was far greater than the boy and the others. Yin Nuashing shrugged. Even if they had transcended the void seal, it did not mean that they could immediately grasp the power of the void. They had just barely built a bridge and did not instantly transform from a landlubber to a swimmer. But at least they could cross the bridge, and grasping the power of the void that they did not understand at all did not allow them to instantly become powerful enough to fight against an entire world. Then, they gathered about 11% of that world's power to create a void portal or something else related to the void. I don't really remember, but it was something that could barely move through the void and leave. because it was an unconventional creation that transcended the void and was not created by someone who had truly analyzed the void to a certain extent. It was not replicable. That's right. It was the only bridge that led to the other side, and it was created by accident. That bridge collapsed under the torrent of the other 80% of power, and in less than 2 days, the void calamity descended, and the entire world was doomed. Yin Nuoxing shook her hand and sighed. What a miserable boy. Ah, so miserable that it's a pity. After 2,000 years of effort and struggle, he chose to accept the entanglement of the natural order and turned it into his own fate. Then he fought with everything he had, and in the end, all his efforts vanished into thin air, just like a joke. As for what those people were thinking, I really don't know. I'm not a fool, so how would I know what they were thinking? You can't really expect everyone to choose to fight to survive in the moment of life and death. Perhaps there were some who would calculate the gains and losses of the present. I've seen some, and I've seen them. Anyway, tomorrow's death is tomorrow's matter, and next year's matter is next year's matter. Today's gains are the most important. I was a little confused when I first heard that. The more you dig, the more ridiculous you'll find the bottom line, because some people have no bottom line at all. Actually, with more time, when they could really use the power of the void, they would no longer have any scruples. It's a pity that time is just a little bit short. Huey's expression was strange. Why do I feel like something is not right? Shouldn't they first understand the power of the void before starting to build a bridge in the void? The time needed to build a bridge is much shorter than the time needed to master the power of the void. The former requires less analysis and mastery of the void than the latter. Yin Nuoxing sighed softly. For more than 2,000 years, in a world that has never come into contact with the void, a world with zero foundation, it's already very impressive for an ordinary world to have grasped the skill to open a path in the void in 2,000 years. But to master the power of the void, they still need more time. 2 days after the bridge was successfully built, the disaster broke out. How much time do you think they have? That's true. We scratched his head and was silent for a while. Speaking of which, how do we get so far? What were we talking about just now? We were talking about that guy who seemed to know something, and now we don't know what to do. Yin Nuoxing spread her hands and sighed. We made an O sound. Now they had really let them go. It looked like a one-way entrance, and the gap did not allow them to pass through. It was a little. I don't know what to do next. Anyway, let's just continue with the previous situation. There won't be any progress if we just stand here. Yin Nuoxing clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. She then looked at Mu, Songyuan, and the others. We're going to continue exploring the ruins in the wasteland. You guys, Mu, Songyuan thought for a while. Let's go back and report. Maybe we'll have to go back to Glow. If what you said is really hidden there, it's necessary to explore again. Well, let's go back and take a look first. Okay, then let's part here. If there's a chance in the future, we'll meet again. Mu Songyuan nodded slightly and looked at her deeply. He then left the center of the wasteland with his companions with mixed feelings. He felt that many things had become strange after this trip to the wasteland. Although the result should be a good thing, as Feng Ling said, the root of the problem, this question that they had never thought about, suddenly broke into their cognition. How should they deal with it? Phew, this was another troublesome matter. There were still some things hidden in the tranquil wasteland. Perhaps it was something that Shura could only give up on because it was not a high priority in the process of inducing the wasteland. For example, why would there be an explosion of energy from the underground after the ruins were demolished? What was the purpose of the ruins scattered all over the wasteland? They still did not know these, even the tranquil wasteland itself. They did not know how many years ago a place that belonged to the human race suddenly exploded one day and became the territory of the demonized beings. Logically speaking, they felt stuck. After all, they did not know much now, and there was no way to make a logical judgment. They could only treat this matter as fact and understand it in reverse. Otherwise, they would start from the root of the problem. They could come up with dozens of reasons, but in the end, none of them were reliable. Aya, there are really many reasons. There are so many that I can't even explain them all. Yin Nuashing felt a little helpless when she saw that everyone was staring at her, wanting her to say something. She could only squeeze out a few words. Studying demonized energy kills itself. Suddenly, a mutated great demon falls from the sky. Or it could simply sit on top of a volcano with a bunch of energy nestled in the ground. Or it could be torturing the concept layer to create something bad and exploding itself. The fissure has concept power, which is definitely related to the concept layer, so it can't run away. So, torturing the concept layer to cause an explosion makes sense. Plus, didn't the concept of space collapse, so it makes more sense. You see, everything seems to make sense, and without a more accurate general direction, it won't make sense at all. That being said, he did have a few clearer questions. The fissure with concept power was suspected to lead to another space, and the black and white energy that leaked out from the other space into the tranquil wastelands would also absorb energy from the wastelands. It was a two-way energy channel. However, the energy that leaked out from the other space became weird when it reached the wastelands. After it leaked and spread out, it was probably weakened into demonized energy big, while Shura and other demonized life forms had demonized energy small. That was to make it easier to distinguish between two similar but not exactly the same energy. Then, according to this line, the black and white energy would become demonized energy, big after it was weakened, changed, and adjusted, while the latter would become demonized energy, small after it was continuously weakened, changed, eroded, and invaded something specific. That was probably what it meant. It was no wonder that Shura would treat the other space as something, a place of ascension. He probably intended to hide in there for a while, and when he was successful in his cultivation, he would return with his army and flatten everything. That's the situation for now. The tranquil wastelands being divided into 3 circles coincides with this situation. Yinuashing said slowly as he snapped his fingers. And by the looks of it, the demonized energy is weakened because the original energy of order in the environment was weakened bit by bit. But why did it stop after spreading to this area? Siyu was munching on the apple in her hand. She did not speak ambiguously, but there was a puzzled look on her face. The previous demonized race used their method to keep the fissure open, and the energy kept leaking from there to here. If this process continues, the wastelands would be connected to the surrounding chaos wastelands sooner or later. So why did it stop at this boundary? I'm not sure. Let's put that question aside for now. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly and shook his head. He led everyone out of the center and went to other places. They had been standing here talking for a long time, and it was time to do something. Little Qingzi and the others had already been active for a while, so they felt bad about slacking off. After communicating with Little Qingzi for a while and confirming the scope of the wastelands that they had explored, the group discussed and decided to split up, but considering that only Fei Zue and Lu Xiaoqiu knew what these ruins were for, it did not seem to make a difference whether they split up or not. They simply gathered together and started to walk out from the center of the wastelands, looking for new ruins along the way. There were ruins from the last 4 eras in the wastelands. The center itself was a pit. As for what its predecessor was, no one knew. The ancestors of Ashura clan might know, but they could not find them, so they could only give up. Near the big pit in the center, with the edge of the big pit as a radius, drew a circle, drew a fan shape. The ruins of the last 4 eras and the last 3 eras were almost all within the scope of this fan shape. The last 4 eras were basically in the inner circle, and the last 3 eras were a little further away. The relic of the last 4 generations had a shape that made everyone feel a little resentful. It was a huge building that covered an area of hundreds of miles. At first glance, there were 5 things in total. There were 4 pillars erected at the 4 corners of the building. They were tens of thousands of feet high and in diameter, and placed on top of the pillars. It looked like a ball was placed on top of the 4 pillars. It was a huge, round, green sphere. It looked like a ball was placed on top of the base, cast by the 4 pillars. I thought I wouldn't see Qiuqiu here anymore. We couldn't help but mutter in the soul transmission. I'm tired of seeing Qiuqiu, and Chocho in the observer space every day. Yin Nuashing turned her head and laughed dryly. I'm sorry to see Chocho hanging all over the sky. When they stepped into the area covered by the energy of the ruins, everyone was slightly startled. A very strong aura suddenly enveloped their heads, causing them to be slightly startled. The energy contained a huge will, and there was a faint sense of restlessness. It seemed to be mixed with something inside, causing people to feel a little restless. It's still the same. This force has been lingering in the ruins of the last 4 eras. It has been difficult for us to deal with it. When Emerald felt this force, she was not surprised at all. She was a little distressed. This inexplicable force entangled in the ruins seemed to have hindered their movements. But this time, it seems to be very safe to go in with you. Yin Nuashing identified it and said, Didn't you deal with this force? You should be able to deal with it. No, it won't work. Emerald sighed. She pulled her ponytail and couldn't help but mutter, What a strange force. I can't recognize it at all. If we want to deal with it by force, we will just make our own people hit the wall in vain. When the time comes, 5 people will have to go in, and 12 people will have to go in. The extra 5 people will fall during the rescue. 2 people will be responsible for dragging the first 10 people out, and finally, 1 person will be responsible for bringing the 12 people back. Everyone, it sounded like a relay to drag the people out step by step. Yin Nuashing frowned and crossed her arms. Can't deal with it? It shouldn't be, it shouldn't be. When Emerald heard this, she looked at him strangely. Why do you think we can deal with it? We don't have such a powerful force like you. No. Although it is related to the strength of the force, it's not just a problem. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath. This is the power of consciousness and will. The power that you're all using. Although you can't use it to create anything, you can still use it to resist and disperse part of it, as long as you don't forcibly resist the will contained in this force. Consciousness and will? Emerald's eyes widened. Her face was full of disbelief. Lu Xiaoqiu suddenly said, But it is completely different from the will that we know. It's 2 different things. Yin Nuashing was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, he closed his mouth and thought for a while. After a while, he said, It's like this. Because of the influence of the era gap, even the level of consciousness and will has decreased. Indeed, although these 2 forces can be classified as the same type, their nature is different. The ancient will? Emerald looked at him and rolled her eyes. She seemed to understand. Then there's no other way. The era gap has been broken, and everything has been forgotten. There's no other way if we can't deal with it. Yin Nuashing pursed his lips. He took a while to sort out something. Speaking of which, I found something. The era gap should appear once in every era. The energy crystallization should also be affected by it. What do you mean? You see, starting from when we came into contact with the ruins of the previous generation, then the 2nd generation, the 3rd generation, and the 4th generation. Every time we push back time by an era, there will be an additional force in the ruins. See, you immediately understood. He clapped his hands and said quickly, The ruins of the previous generation only had pure energy. The 2nd generation had the power of the soul, the 3rd generation had the power of the mind, and the 4th generation still had the power of consciousness. But it's completely different from the power of consciousness that we have now. Huey's face twitched when he heard this. It sounds like a change of power every era. Oh no? Yin Nuashing shook his head and denied Huey's statement. It's not a change. The most important force in every era is the power of will. It's just that in the last few eras, there will be some other things that are different. You can say that it's embellishment, but my personal understanding is more. Well, from the very beginning, everyone could control these forces, will, soul, and spirit, and the 3 are actually complementary to each other. In the last 4 generations, the power of will was complete, but in the last 3 generations, the power of will began to weaken, and then the spirit soul, and until now, they're all gone. Emerald shrunk her neck and muttered, That's... Now, only the power of will is left. The power of spirit and soul is reserved for the time being, but if we don't use it, well, we can't find a place to use it. Now, We can't even give the power of will to creations. Creations are just pure energy creations and rules, let alone other forces. Shuang Shuang listened blankly and said, after another era gap, even the level of energy may begin to weaken. This is really something that is very likely to happen. This was a relic of the last 4 generations, and the ball at the top of the pillar, they didn't discover anything. In fact, there wasn't even an internal space. Xiao Xiao circled around the pillar and inspected it once, and then very indifferently said to everyone, "Medicine ball, full energy, creation of rules." Yin Nuoxing was stunned. There's no power of order? Yes, there's no power of order. He took a deep breath and thought. While thinking, he covered his forehead and muttered, "Could it be that we can still find the power of order in the relic of the last 5 generations?" According to this trend, it was indeed very likely. Since the power of order appeared in the environment on the other side of the cracked door, it proved that the power of order existed in this world before. Since it didn't exist now, and since the relic of the last 4 generations had not found the power of order, it could only be in the relic before that. We couldn't help but mutter, "Phone, I think we'll see a ghost sooner or later if we continue to look for it." Yin Nuoxing. Oh, I'm already mentally prepared. Even if a ghost pops up in this place, I'll still be able to calmly rush forward. After walking around the ball and the pillar for a while, you couldn't help but ask Feizi, "What's the use of this pillar and ball?" "No, I don't know. Currently, we only have the experience of constantly moving people out of the relic of the last 4 generations." Feizi shrunk her neck and muttered. Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. 5 people rushed in, and a total of 13 people came back. Just listening to this sounded very ridiculous. Shuang Shuang also checked around, pulled Little Star, and said, "The power of will. It's blank. There's only the power of will. There's no, obsession. They're blank." Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened. After thinking for a long time, she could only explain, maybe the obsessions that were left behind had been destroyed. After all, they were placed in the wasteland. The order demonized energy hovering here might be able to kill them. Everyone walked around it for a while, and after confirming that they didn't find anything, they planned to leave. Before they left, Feizi hurriedly said, This doesn't need to be blown up. Anyway, they're no longer here. It shouldn't affect anything if we leave it here." I was just about to say that. Yin Nuoxing nodded and floated a look at the huge sphere in the distance. "I'll leave a mark to check the situation. Just leave it there. If we blow it up, I'm afraid that the tranquil wasteland will collapse." He didn't forget about blowing up a piece of the wasteland and collapsing it. They found about a dozen ruins near the inner circle. All of them were from the 4th generation. Only when they went a little further outside the middle circle and at the edge of the inner circle and the middle circle could they see ruins from the 3rd generation. They didn't know how the ruins were set up. Until now, they still didn't know what the ruins were used for. They only knew that they were either created by energy or laws. Each of the ruins had the power of will, and that was it. "Lord Feng, are you free?" I Ching's weird voice suddenly rang out, startling Yin Nuoxing. "I'm free. Speak normally." "Oh, ahem. How's the exploration going on over there? Can you tell me about the place where you found the ruins? We found something, and we have a little guess that needs to be verified." "Huh?" Yin Nuoxing replied blankly. She reported the location of the energy mark that she left in the ruins to I Ching. She couldn't help but ask, "Why are you asking about this? Did you find something?" Wait a moment, let me see." I Ching replied vaguely. After confirming for a while, he exclaimed, "Oh, Lord Feng, I found an interesting piece of information. Let's find a place to sit down and talk. You'll definitely be surprised." Chapter 1998. All of a sudden, little Qing Zi said that he had found something interesting and pointed them in a direction. As he led them to the location, he made a strange hee-hee sound through the soul communication channel. At first glance, it sounded very creepy and weird. It was as if a young man had suddenly found something and was giggling. 2 minutes later, Yin Nuashing and the others landed on the other side of the fourth-generation ruins. They looked at the building on top of the pillar and scanned their surroundings. Then, they saw little Qing Zi waving at them from below the ball. "Lord Feng, Lord Hui, over here, over here." I Ching raised his hand and shouted. When Lord Maple and the others ran over, he waved his hand and had the other order warriors disperse. The latter and the others bowed from afar and continued to lay prone on the spherical pillar-shaped building to ponder. They knocked on the ruins incessantly, leading everyone to little Qing Zi. Yinhuashing first looked at the order warriors who were lying on top of the pillar and the ball as if they were going to lift it up. After some thought, she decided to ignore them for the time being. She asked little Qing Zi, "So you found something interesting?" "Ahem, it's like this." I Ching coughed softly and cleared his throat, placing the crystal balls that he had tidied up in the space around him. "We've sorted out the situation of the tranquil wastelands because there are more ruins here than we thought. There's an area above ground and a circle below ground. Apart from that, the large buildings we've found so far are only visible on the surface. In fact, most of them have been torn apart by the torrent of time, and we've barely managed to find some remains. Well, remains are also troublesome. If we hadn't gotten used to and familiarized ourselves with the Fortress of Origin back then, we probably wouldn't have been able to restore part of the information based on the remains. Oh, right, we've also restored their original locations and recorded them in the crystal ball." Yin Nuashing asked, "What kind of weird talent did you guys choose?" I Ching shrunk his neck and laughed dryly. "It's all because of the Fortress of Origin. If I didn't change my talent urgently, I wouldn't have been able to torture that big guy. Although they would be done after a while. Well, there's no harm in having more skills. Since I've learned them, I can't forget them. We've restored the map of the Tranquil Wasteland as completely as possible. Aside from the terrain, we drew a simpler map and placed everything we found on it." As I Ching spoke, he opened the crystal balls around them and projected the energy image in the space in front of them. Everyone immediately gathered and curiously examined the large map that was 10 feet wide in front of them. The ground was a light brownish yellow, and the whole map was dotted with bright yellow and green dots. There were also many other colors that were marked. However, they were just simple markings. After all, the map was newly made. He was responsible for explaining the specific meaning of these dots and markings. The map covers the entire area of the Tranquil Wasteland. The gray and black refer to the demonized energy. Although you already know the arrangement of the demonized energy in the Tranquil Wasteland, I've marked it out so that you can see it more clearly. Hee hee. I Ching smiled and pointed to the center. The center is where the demonized energy is the most concentrated. It's like a drop of oil dripping into water. It starts to spread evenly in all directions to form a complete circle. Then it starts to weaken here, and the color gradually fades. When the color fades to this extent, this is the middle circle. The area outside, where only the light gray color is left, is the outer circle. Yin Nuashing looked carefully for a while and frowned slightly. It's too uniform. There's no trace of change or diffusion. The inner, outer, and outer circles are really 3 circles. They're clearly separated and don't interfere with each other. As long as the energy is in the same area within the circle, it maintains the same concentration of energy. It's as if it's completely fixed in this state. Siyu held his shoulder and swung it back and forth. After looking at the map for a while, she said, "What does this mean?" "Well, it means that the entire secluded wasteland is under the control of something." Yin Nuashing explained, "Previously, when I learned that the size of the Tranquil Wasteland was constant, I assumed that it was a permanent domain that would not change no matter how much time passed. I also assumed that there might be something limiting its range. Up to this point, there was no problem. But if the energy density of the inner domain was arranged in such a consistent manner without any changes, you can imagine that the sea would no longer be affected by the wind and would no longer be affected by the temperature of the sea. There would no longer be any undercurrents, and it would forever become a pool of calm water that is only big. In other words, it would have lost its connection with the outside world and would no longer be affected by anything external. It's completely isolated from the outside world. This point proves that it's deliberately controlled by something. It also shows that it's in a state of isolation from the outside world. There's an energy source inside, a source that affects everything. At the same time, it's precisely controlling the energy in this area without any interaction with the outside world. It's trying its best to keep itself in a stable state. But here's the problem. When we entered the secluded wasteland, we didn't feel that we've crossed a domain or entered some kind of restricted space. Did you guys feel that? Seeing that everyone shook their heads after thinking for a while, Yin Washing shrugged. That's a little strange. I can probably explain that. It's because I want to explain that that's why I called all of you here. I Ching said with a smile and pointed at the flickering green light in the secluded wasteland. Lord Feng, look at these. The green light spots should be the ruins of the previous 3 and 4 generations. They're all arranged in the inner circle of the secluded wasteland. Well, the brighter ones should be the ruins of the previous 4 generations. They're so densely packed that it looks like, it's quite orderly. They're all arranged in a direction away from the center of the secluded wasteland. Not only that, if the light spots closest to the center of the wasteland were connected one by one, everyone watched as he used an energy stick to point at the green light spots and left energy lines on the map. Slowly, he made half a circle and finally closed it into a complete circle. Then they were all stunned. A considerable portion of the green light spots just happened to fall on this circle, not missing at all. This is arranged according to a circle. Hui immediately understood. And then he also discovered something. He took the stick from Maple's hand and pointed on it. Not only that, if all the ruins are connected in this way, I Ching nodded with a smile. You can see circles after circles, connecting all the ruins of the corresponding era together. That's the answer. Well, although there are still gaps in some places and there are no ruins or fragments to be found, we can just assume that there's something there. After all, this pattern matches too well. This is a sign of sealing the tranquil wasteland. These circles are all concentric. The ruins of the same era are not only arranged in a circle, but they are also arranged in a diameter, layer by layer away from the center of the wasteland. Yin Nuoshing understood and looked at the ruins that were all connected together. He looked carefully and suddenly said, there are 3 rings of ruins from the previous 4th generation in the inner circle. Back then, people used thousands of ruins to encircle the secluded wasteland in 3 rings to seal it. I see. This is why the demonized energy in the secluded wasteland became like this. It's not that they can only spread like this, nor is there something controlling the flow of energy in the secluded wasteland, but there is something inside that is trying its best to limit its range of activity. It has been releasing energy as if its life depended on it, but it was all restricted by the ruins. Lu Xiaoqiu's green eyes widened. Then, if we destroy the ruins, won't we? Everyone was speechless. That's just digging their own grave. The thing that was used to restrict the tranquil wasteland was destroyed just like that. We're done for. Is something big going to happen? Fate Sue's pretty face turned pale when she heard this. It seemed like she was about to join the ranks of the statues. Oh, but the people of the demonized race can also use these ruins. I'm afraid that this knowledge was obtained from their seniors. They can use the ruins, so naturally, they can also use the shackles that were supposed to be seals as sharp arrows against their enemies. Yin Nuoshing frowned slightly. She looked at Fate Sue and said with a slightly serious tone, it doesn't matter if they know that the ruins are used to seal the wasteland, and it doesn't matter if you know about it or not. When they plan to use the ruins and you can't stop them, destroy it, and stop the demonized actions is one of the options. At this time, there is no time to think about the so-called future. If you don't destroy the ruins and let Shura and the others hide in the dark for a while, they will die quickly. He can turn a ruin into a great demon, and the energy released by the great demon in the ruins can directly destroy the defenses of other cities except for the capital of God. It is obviously more dangerous to leave it alone, so don't worry about it. Well, I'm glad that you can comfort me. Fate Sue shrunk her neck when she heard this. She stared at the 20-something circles for a while and couldn't help but smile bitterly and scratch her head. Indeed, we didn't know about this. It is because we know what the demonized are using the ruins for, and we can't stop them. We have no choice but to destroy them. If we can, we don't want to tear them down. Those are cultural relics, and it is better to keep them for research than to burn them to the ground. But, well, since there are already 3 circles in the inner circle, why? Fei pointed at the slightly lighter green circles of the previous 3 generations. There were a total of 5 circles, and the number of the ruins that were arranged by the previous 3 generations was even more. Why did the ruins of the previous 3 generations, 2 generations, and the previous generation have to be arranged like this? Didn't they already have a seal? Because, with the passage of time, the seal that exists in the center of the ruins can no longer hold on. Yin Nuoxing crossed her arms and let out a long sigh of relief. They gradually weakened in the torrent of time and have lost the ability to completely maintain the seal. In other words, the tranquil wasteland that had been stabilized has once again begun to spread to the outside. The people of the previous 3 generations may have realized the situation and used the remaining knowledge and corresponding methods to strengthen the seal. Thus, these 5 circles of ruins were added. You see, the area covered by the demonized energy in the inner circle has a small area that has exceeded the circle drawn by the ruins of the previous 4 generations. This means that the tranquil wasteland is still spreading. Moreover, the ruins of the previous 4 generations have no way to completely bind it to this area. The people of the previous 3 generations must have continued to strengthen the seal under this situation. Yin Nuoxing's finger continued to move outwards. She pointed at the yellow circles and said, "Similarly, the ruins of the previous 2 generations and the previous generation are the same. The tranquil wasteland is not unchanging. Under the condition that the demonized race deliberately preserve the crack, it will continue to leak energy until the entire land is in the bag. Well, under the premise that the ruins are used to block the demonized energy, it seems to be able to explain the purpose of the other ruins that are scattered all over the land. It's like a fortress in front of a battle, a bridgehead resisting the stormy waves that come from the front." Fei heard this and exclaimed as if she had understood something. "No wonder. So far, most of the ruins that we have discovered are arranged along the Chaos Wasteland. Even if there are ruins that are arranged in a place far away from the Chaos Wasteland, it's only a very sporadic part of it." Yin Nuoxing looked at the map twice. After confirming that the things marked on the map had been explained, he looked at Little Qing and asked, "Is there anything else worth noting? Like the main body of the ruins?" "Not at the moment." I Ching shook her head. When she said this, she turned around and glanced at the Order warriors who were trying hard to dismantle the ruins. She looked helpless and said, "We also want to dismantle it and take a look. But the situation is, as you can see, we have tried on every single ruin once, and all of them returned empty-handed. We can't even find a crack that can be pried open. Well, the ruins of the previous 4 generations have a huge force of will. Although some kind of obsession that should have existed has been destroyed, it still can't be dismantled. The obsession is only used to tell the people who want to dismantle it why it exists and why it is guarding this place. After all, the obsession is a kind of strong will. Even if it's blurred, it still exists. In fact, it still plays its role as a kind of power. It's just that we don't know why it exists, so we can't dismantle it with simple methods. If we want to explore it, we can only—" Yin Nuoxing immediately shut up. Hui smiled bitterly and said, "If we dismantle it, there's no point in exploring it." Yin Nuoxing stuck her tongue out at him with dead fish eyes. Then he really couldn't do anything. The force of will was just a kind of power. He could just drown it with a stronger power. But if he wanted to know what was hidden inside, or how it was formed, he had to ensure its existence. In other words, if he couldn't dismantle it, he could only break its defense. But the force of will didn't have the ability to break defense. Once the defense was broken, it would explode. There was no compromise. This was great. They didn't intend to dismantle the ruins in the first place. Now that they knew that the ruins acted as a seal, they couldn't dismantle it. But but they seem to have already dismantled more than a dozen ruins from the previous 3 generations. It shouldn't be a problem. Hasn't the crack closed? The demonized energy won't flow anymore. Shuang Shuang reminded everyone who was overwhelmed by the destruction of the ruins. Everyone slapped their foreheads and face-palmed. They had forgotten the most important thing. Now that the source had been eliminated, what was there to be afraid of? The concentration of the demonized energy in the tranquil wasteland was gradually decreasing. Perhaps the ruins still had the ability to slowly purify the energy. Since the seal could remain intact even when the ruins were damaged, it should not be a problem if the source of the demonized energy had disappeared. The purification function should still exist. As long as they waited for a while, the tranquil wasteland should disappear. In the future, people could only learn about this place from history. So, solving the environmental problem had to start from the source. The dozen or so Order warriors who had been circling the sphere for a long time gave up on tormenting it after their conversation ended. They gathered one by one, dejected and unhappy. It seemed that they were a little depressed after toying with this tough bone for half an hour without any results. The power of will is quite troublesome. It can't be helped that we can't do anything about it. If it's just simple destruction, it would have been over. Yin Nuoxing saw their helpless faces and shrugged. She said to little Qing, "Pack up and get ready to retreat. There's probably nothing left here." Wait a minute. Okay, it's a deal. I Ching didn't take more than a few seconds to finish his sentence. Then he asked, "What do we do next?" "Let's go north." Yin Nuoxing turned his head and looked towards the north. The nearest suspected entrance is in the north. Although I don't know where exactly it is in the north, it's better to go and take a look than stay here in a daze. I Ching replied with an "oh," and was about to lead the vanguard to the north to find their destination. Just as he turned around and was about to leave, the space suddenly trembled. It was as if they were locked in a box, and then the box was slammed against the wall by someone. Everyone was also jolted by this sudden tremor. None of them were able to maintain their horse stance properly, and they all staggered a few times and almost fell down. Boom! A violent rumble shook the earth. It was as if a huge and heavy energy pillar had fallen from the sky and smashed into the ground, causing the earth to churn again. This time, except for Yin Nuoxing, everyone swayed and fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, they were all shorter. Yin Nuoxing was flustered. He held Shuang Shuang and Blue Phoenix in his left and right hands. The little angel consciously wrapped around him. Siyu had already fallen into his arms, so she did not fall. He also waved the chain of order to bind everyone who was about to fall. In an instant, they all turned into gymnastics performers. Their arms, waists, and legs were all twisted into strange shapes. I hate it. It's happening. Yin Nuoxing hurriedly straightened everyone up, then sighed and turned his head. After everyone steadied themselves, they followed his gaze and looked over. The vibration came from the building on the top of the pillar. A few black cracks suddenly appeared at the bottom of the ball. It looked like an egg that had been cracked. It was gradually cracking under the influence of an unknown external force, and a small piece of green debris fell down. The debris was about 10 meters in size, and it was the size of a small attic. It crashed in front of them with a loud bang, and the vibration made them all stupefied. Boom, boom, boom. After a few seconds, the ground lifted its surfboard excitedly and set off waves on the land. It seemed like it was on a surf on dry land. In just 5 seconds, a huge wave was set off. The ground in front of them on the right suddenly rose up to a height of 10,000 feet and then fell rapidly. The ground was constantly being crushed throughout the entire process. The sound of cracking echoed in the entire space. It was the sound of the entire ruin cracking. Its fragments had begun to fall from above like raindrops, and the whole thing began to disintegrate. The fragments that were 10 to 100 meters long continued to fall from the surroundings, setting off a mighty wave of dust. Yin Nuoxing looked at it for less than 2 seconds before hurriedly dragging everyone away from the ruin. Looking from afar, half of the ruin had been drowned by the dust and smoke that splashed up. One could also see 4 pillars carrying a ball throwing things down with all their might. The echo of the falling objects hitting the ground was extremely noisy and ear-piercing. Yin Nuoxing looked back at I Ching and the others indifferently. "What did you do to it?" "We just did some ordinary research." One of the Order warriors was sweating profusely. He looked nervous. "We definitely didn't do anything dangerous. We didn't try to break it by force. Really, I feel that ever since we entered the wasteland, we have not been in an environment without tremors for more than a few minutes." We cannot help but blurt out, "Sure enough, the ground is shaking wherever we go." "Feng, you're such a troublemaker." Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes fiercely. He was about to argue with him about this matter, but the sudden movement from the ruins made him not have the time to care about Hui. Right now, he only wanted to know what was going on. The pillars in the four corners of the ruins that had mysteriously disintegrated suddenly broke, and the huge ball that they were supporting suddenly fell down. The ladder's huge size and weight, coupled with the fact that its surface was full of cracks and scars, after it slammed the ground with all its might, it turned into debris and dust that flew in the wind. The dust that covered the sky was like volcanic ash that had just erupted, spreading far away with the wind. It took a while for the impact of the impact to reach them. At this time, it had become a gust of wind, mixed with a weak power of will, as if it was still trying to tell them something, but even it had been blurred by the passage of time. Thousands of words were left with only a sigh, and no one paid any attention to it. It was not over yet. Just like when they demolished the ruin, not long after this ruin collapsed, the earth trembled again. But this time, it did not intend to stop. In just a short minute, the earth trembled more and more violently. The shaking caused the space to step on the pace of surfing. The originally calm, dark clouds in the sky suddenly began to roll violently. High-energy, demonic energy rushed rapidly in the clouds, brewing and changing rapidly. Suddenly, I Ching's face changed. He hurriedly said, "Lord Feng, the other ruins in the wasteland have all collapsed. All the ruins that we are observing have collapsed at the same time." "Wow," we could not help but exclaim. He then whistled and patted Feng's shoulder. "Feng, we're in trouble. If it was not for this sudden and inexplicable occurrence, he would have kicked this guy out." The inexplicable collapse of the ruins. Forget it. In short, it was inexplicable. In less than 2 minutes, they felt a violent tremor coming from the other side of the earth. An earthquake. No, it was not an earthquake. He seemed to see an invisible energy turning into a big hand and slapping at the center of the wasteland. That hand was bigger than the big pit in the center. It was using all its strength to press down on the ground with the center of the big pit as the origin. It pressed down with all its strength, as if it wanted to compress that piece of land into a flat cake. The tremors, the large cracks in the earth, and other movements were just incidental phenomena caused by the palm. At first, he thought that he would eventually see a crumbling ground that tilted towards the center of the wasteland. However, he still thought too simply. It was only when those large cracks that traversed the earth suddenly released a ray of light that was dim enough to dye the sun, moon, and stars black that he realized that things might not be so simple. This crack had already run through the entire underground. What is this? The scene that looked like the blooming of the earth and the scene of the aurora hanging upside down on the ground scared Fei Cui and Lu Xiaoqiu. Even though the latter was completely numb, she could not help but grab his robe and widen her green eyes. This power, it's far more terrifying than the demonic energy. What the hell is this? Something under the ground. Yin Nuoxing and Hui looked at each other and nodded. They quickly exchanged glances to let each other know the situation. Then he continued, "There are some things buried under the ground. I don't know if you know, that is something like a barrier, something that is used to shield and interfere with detection. There are specific layers of existence buried deep underground. So far, I still don't know what they are, but now he looked at the extremely deep black light that gushed out from the crack like a curtain. Now it has appeared in front of us, but I still don't know what it is." Everyone's soul images quickly looked at each other. Yin Nuoxing shook her head first. Hui shrugged and Little Xiao and Sui Qing also shook their heads to express their denial. They all gave a negative answer together. This was not the chaotic energy. It still belonged to the order, but the order power it contained was extremely huge, comparable to the order power of the high-level premier level. Moreover, it was an extremely negative order power. There were layers and layers of such things under the ground. Why did he feel that the world might be over? If all of them burst out, wouldn't it? Hiss! Even the world would be turned upside down, and the ground would be lifted into the sky. Chapter 1999. The mysterious, unknown object buried underground, for the time being, was a concrete object that could be seen but not touched. It could be distinguished but could not be sensed. It was a bit like the feeling of a beginner trying to touch the void for the first time. The only difference was that when trying to analyze the void, the beginner's brain would burn. But this unknown object, after trying for a long time, did not intend to respond to anyone. This was the situation he and Hui got when they tried to touch it for the first time. Because it could be seen but not touched, and also seemed like some kind of rule or concept existence, they regarded it as a special structure in this world that was difficult to touch. They threw it away and chose to forget it. Until now, when they realized that it was reacting, they were so anxious that they could only let out a sigh of relief in their hearts, and then hurriedly fled with their people. It was definitely not fun to be caught in the energy explosion of a high-level premier. Even if there was a shield here that could withstand the energy explosion, it did not mean that they liked to drill into the center of the energy explosion. That was something that only masochistic people would do. While they were running for their lives, the tremors in the tranquil wasteland were so violent that it was about to flip the table and flip the earth upside down. Countless large cracks were opening up and running across the entire wasteland. Black earth light was constantly blooming from the cracks, illuminating the dark clouds in the sky. Just by staying in the wasteland, one could experience the feeling of not being able to see one's own fingers in front of one's face. When they jumped out of the wasteland and immediately turned around, what they saw was a pure black curtain. It was a space completely occupied by the black light. The layer of black light completely enveloped the tranquil wasteland and the dark clouds above it, reaching straight up to the sky like a pillar of energy. They believed that the strange phenomenon in the center of this large area had attracted the attention of many people. Perhaps someone was looking, or perhaps someone was fearlessly rushing over. Of course, it was more likely that the warriors of the Grand Temple had come to watch with their fleet. In short, there should be a lot of spectators now, and everyone was in position. So, it was time to use the grandest fireworks to send a curtain call to this matter. To put it in layman's terms, it finally could not hold back and was about to make a big news. The expected hot, intense, and vast energy explosion did not happen. The black energy beam existed for half a minute before it suddenly disappeared. Then, a huge black energy ball began to bloom from the center of the tranquil wasteland. It expanded at a speed that far exceeded the limits of normal laws. In just a few seconds, the entire tranquil wasteland had been swallowed by the energy ball. Then, the energy ball's speed slowed down the moment it passed through the wasteland. It started to appear slow on the scale of the map. However, if one were to observe it from a distance, one could still feel that the energy ball was expanding at an exaggerated speed. The expanding dark radiance shone across the entire sky. It was as if a giant black sun was blooming. Even the dark clouds in the sky were distorted and swallowed by the energy ball. The surrounding space was distorted like a pancake under the influence of this newly born black star. On the surface of the black energy ball, there were white clouds and smoke, floating and surging, condensing into what seemed to be some special patterns and patterns. He looked at the changing patterns and frowned slightly. He had a feeling that these patterns were condensed by some other power. However, there was no time for him to observe more. After the energy ball had dug out 1/10 of the area of the wasteland, it trembled slightly. Then, like a balloon that had expanded to its limit, it instantly poured out all the air. Then, with a whoosh, it shrank towards the center. In an instant, it was only a few thousand feet wide or a few hundred feet wide. Then it was completely annihilated. Along with the space and land that were completely swallowed by the energy ball, all that was left was a huge crater with an exaggerated size. So far, the quiet wasteland had become a name in history. Even the archaeologists could only pick up the surrounding smoke and dust to see if there was anything left. Even the traces left behind by generations of people who fought against the quiet wasteland had disappeared completely. What was left behind was only a huge crater that was big enough to fit a galaxy. As for the onlookers, well, for the time being, it didn't see anyone who was really fearless and rushed here. Also, according to Emerald, there was actually no one living in a considerable distance from the quiet wasteland. The cities of the 4 regions were basically arranged in a ring around the quiet wasteland. They were very far away from each other, so the 1/10 of the wasteland that was dug out did not affect anyone. This was actually good news for them. Before this, they didn't do any disaster warning, nor did they take any precautions. If this inexplicable outbreak directly hit other people's cities, well, although this disaster was not caused by them, they would still feel a little guilty. Congratulations that it didn't turn into an earth-shattering explosion. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but clap her hands and look back at Emerald and Lu Xiaoqiu, who had just escaped death. Although the 2 girls were already numb, they were still frightened by the movement just now. Looking at their thoughtful expressions, they were probably thinking about how to report what happened in the last period of time. After all, they were the members of the Great Shrine. The necessary reports were still necessary, and this would probably make them pull out a lot of hair. They hadn't figured out the cause of the incident, but the result was clear. Now that they were back on top of the quiet wasteland, they looked down as if they were looking into the abyss. They couldn't sense any strange or abnormal energy aura from below. The energy was even completely devoured by Qiu just now, and they couldn't recover in a short time. The layer, curtain, barrier buried under the ground. Whatever it is, it's referring to that thing. Yin Nuoxing raised his hand and pointed at the ground below. He said softly, "It's blown up." Hui was startled. Exploded? Was it affected by the energy release just now? Should I say that it was blown up, or that the explosion just now was because it had been accumulating energy for a long time, and it found a vent to release it all at once, which led to the situation we just saw? Furthermore, the range of that energy. Was it a single curtain that was released, or was it the release of 3 or 4 curtains along the way? I just glanced at it roughly, and I don't remember their specific distribution location. Moreover, the layer of curtain under the ground directly disappeared, not just a single area that disappeared. Emerald couldn't help but ask, "What exactly is that thing you're talking about? I haven't heard of anything hidden under the ground at all." "Well, it's normal that you don't know. After all, it's deep underground, and it's even deeper than the ruins where we first met. You shouldn't have run so deep underground for no reason, right?" Yin Nuoxing explained. Fei Chui thought for a moment and understood. It was indeed the case. Who would be so bored to go so deep underground? Even if they were digging ruins, they wouldn't dig so deep. The depth of the underground was so deep. Since ancient times, the number of lives that stepped on it was estimated to be less than 0%. She didn't know how many zeros there were. But it's actually such a dangerous thing. After Emerald sighed, she put on a distressed face, lowered her head, and muttered. Her expression was the same as his when he found out that there was a large group of deadly things buried under the realm of the gods. 30% of it was difficult, 30% of it was crazy, and the remaining 94% of it was half dead. Well, take it easy. We still don't know what's inside that thing and what's inside. Hui gave a thumbs up and showed a bright and reassuring smile. The tranquil wasteland was killed. Although the process was a little violent, a little unexpected, but the result is still good. That so-and-so disappeared, and now we can at least be at ease for a long time. As for what you can do with this extra time of peace, it depends on your own plans. Plans. Emerald muttered these 2 words in a daze. She looked at the big pit below, and a lot of messy thoughts ran rampant in her mind. Her eyes quickly became dull in 3 seconds, and her mind was full of rest, big pit, safe time, and what to do. After a while, her body trembled and she reacted, but she was even more sluggish. Why do I feel like there are more things to do after solving the problem? Yin Nuashing and the others covered their faces and smiled bitterly. It was difficult to deal with the aftermath since ancient times. The bigger the trouble, the more troublesome the aftermath. They were already used to it. When they often went to other people's houses to cause trouble, they would make a big mess and have to slowly clean up. They were responsible for moving, and the locals were responsible for cleaning up. It was a little irresponsible. Bam! It's other people's world, right? Don't meddle too much. They had moved other people's world away, and it was already quite a big mess. Unless it was necessary, they should not meddle in the internal affairs of other people's world. Otherwise, they would feel like they were overshadowing the host. After all, they were still outsiders. Unless they found that they were surrounding their home and causing trouble again and wanted to tear down their world, then they would have to intervene. They had spent a lot of effort to move their world from a remote and desolate place to a place with good mountains, rivers, and scenery, not to see them continue to tear down their home. In short, the quiet wasteland had completely become history. If they wanted to remember or find something, they could only jump into this bottomless pit. After returning to the capital of God in the dark region, Emerald and Lu Xiaoqiu reported to the headquarters with a headache written all over their faces. They gathered together to discuss the next step. However, before discussing, he turned his head to look at Shuang habitually, but he still got the expected answer, which made them feel very helpless. They were already a little suspicious that they had come to the wrong place. We've come to the wrong place. It's still too early to say. After all, we've only been in the Yuan realm for 1 or 2 months. It's still too early. Yin Nuashing patted Shuang's head and sighed. I wonder how the Void frontline is now. It's hard to have any changes in such a short time, Little Hourglass replied. Void-level events usually took a long time to happen, not just the Void calamity that was mentioned earlier. The war between order and chaos that they had to deal with was also a Void-level event, but it was of a higher level and had a greater impact. As for the time, it would naturally take a long time as well. The Chaos Era was the 326th era. In the previous era, the war between order and chaos had been preparing for more than 10 or 20 years, and the confrontation had lasted for several years. This era had been going on since the beginning until now, which was enough to show how time-consuming it was. Well, that's true. Yin Nuashing shrugged and turned her head to look towards the north. Little Qing and the others had already gone to the radiant light region ahead of them. They were walking along the northern direction of the tranquil wasteland to see if they could find anything. They had to set off a little later, and they had to tell Emerald and Lu Xiaoqiu about what they were going to do next. They had to report their itinerary to prevent them from not knowing where they had gone to. Cough, cough. The main thing was that they felt a little apologetic for bringing them around all the time and putting them through all kinds of ridiculous scares. On the way back, the 2 girls' eyes were filled with mischief. They had lost their glory and hope. They felt that if they continued to destroy their worldview, there would be 2 more little lunatics in this world. As the time was short, reporting the situation should not take too much time, so they did not go into the city to shop. Instead, they stood on the city wall and looked at the situation in the tranquil wasteland. They chatted for a while and kept in touch with Yi Qing and the others to see if anything had happened. Soon it was over. About half an hour later, Emerald and Lu Xiaoqiu, who had finished their report, returned to this place. You guys are quite fast this time. You finish your report so quickly. Yin Nuashing looked at the 2 girls landing on the ground and was slightly surprised. Last time, they reported the matter of the ruins where the giant octopus turned into a giant octopus. When the people of Radiance came back, they already reported it. After all, they set off from here this time. Emerald explained, so we added the follow-up matter of the tranquil wasteland. Oh, so what's the result? Speaking of the follow-up, Emerald became silent. Her mouth was mumbling some unknown syllables. After mumbling for a while, she finally said clearly, we can only leave it there. For the time being, we don't have any plans to deal with it. Ah, that's also true. Suddenly rushing to other people's face and asking what's the use of this newly dug big pit. It was too sudden. Their first reaction was to leave it there. Anyway, the 4 major areas were vast, and there was no shortage of land. So, they didn't need to rush to fill it up. They could only leave it there for now. However, in short, we need to use something to surround it first, so as to prevent whimsical people from jumping down. Everyone smiled bitterly. Are there people who like to have such dreams in this place? There's nothing under this big pit, not even a trace of energy. If one jumps down, there's nothing else other than a long period of free fall. As for the thing underground that you mentioned, Emerald pulled her ponytail in front of her and lowered her head to think. After a while, she looked up at Feng Ling and shook her head. The managers also said that they don't know about the existence of this thing underground. But since they already know about its existence, they can't just sit back and do nothing. Not to mention, she paused for a moment and looked at the edge of the big pit that she could barely see. Her body trembled. Not to mention this matter. No matter when something goes wrong, we won't know. Ugh, I don't want to die inexplicably. If possible, I want to die with more understanding. Yin Nuashing nodded in agreement. So, do you plan to explore it later? Yes, but it will take some time. Just discussing the plan and starting the preparations will take a long time. After all, there are very few people involved in the underground domain. But for the time being, I have a rough idea. It should revolve around the pit in the wasteland. I still need to let people from other regions gather together to discuss this matter. Emerald showed a tired expression as she spoke. She sighed and glanced at them. Let's not talk about this for now. What about you guys? What's your plan next? Looking at how busy you are, it seems like you're looking for something. You won't stay here for too long, right? Oh, I was just about to talk to you about this. Yin Nuashing nodded. Next, we will go north and look for that. Look for Mood Sangyin. Then if we can't find that thing that seems to be the entrance, we will continue north. Didn't they say that there's an area in the north? It seems that they haven't explored it clearly. The area in the north. Indeed, they haven't explored it much. Emerald scratched her head and frowned slightly. The area north of the Radiant across the Chaos Demon Wilderness was actually the first to be discovered. It was already explored when the 4 regions gathered 15 years ago. Later, for various reasons, well, in short, they didn't look at the situation there in detail. I heard that the people from the Radiant were the ones who went to explore it. I heard that they were beaten back. Hui Gang was still in a daze. When he heard this, his body suddenly trembled. Beaten back? What's the situation? Beaten back. Blocked halfway by the demonized creatures. I don't think so. Emerald shook her head with a strange expression. They were driven back by the human compatriots in that area. Everyone was speechless. Well, things were starting to change again. When they heard this, they could almost guess the situation. Even if a series of crackling things happened next, they wouldn't be surprised. That's what they mean by driven back, right? See, you tilted her head. You mean that area, isn't very peaceful? While fighting against the demonized creatures, the human compatriots still have the spare energy to fight among themselves. Emerald's pretty face trembled. She turned her head with a subtle expression. I don't want to talk about this. I don't know what kind of mentality I should have when talking about this, especially in front of the Guardian of Will. I don't want to talk about it, but it seems to be the case. Hearing her subtle words, Yin Nuashing was also a little puzzled. Why did you suddenly mention me? No. Why did you suddenly mention the Guardian of Will? It seems like you have some scruples. I don't know much about this title. Can you tell me more about it? Emerald mumbled for a while. She nervously pulled her ponytail and whispered, the Guardian of Will. It's the Guardian of Will. Well, I don't know how to say it, but if you need help with anything, no matter which big temple or main temple you go to, you can get unreserved help. Well, that's what it means. Yin Nuashing took a few deep breaths. She was confused. Faith? It's not that. It's just, you can think of it as a long, long time ago. It's still a habit, a rule. You can call it a tradition. Emerald twisted her hands together and swayed her body from side to side. Her ponytail also swayed. Looking at her awkward appearance, everyone felt uncomfortable. It's strange, isn't it? After so many generations, there are still some things that have been preserved. Even we don't know why. In short, it's a habit. It's a rule that needs to be followed unconditionally. Although it seemed like she said something, it also felt like she didn't say anything. In short, they knew that it was a very difficult tradition to preserve after so many generations. Although the guardian of the wool seemed to have not appeared for a long time, it was not easy to still remember this rule. Although they didn't know why assisting the guardian of the will became a common rule, there must be a reason for it to be kept. It was just like going to someone else's house and seeing some very strange rules and reminders, even strange to the point of being unimaginable. In fact, it might be a lesson learned with a painful price, so they shouldn't ignore it. Anyway, there was always a reason for things to exist. For the time being, they didn't know what the reason was, but it didn't matter. They could try to understand it as long as they figured it out. We don't know what happened at the beginning, but only this sentence has been regarded as a rule and a rule that must be obeyed. All the members of the Great Temple and the main temple must abide by it. Maybe even you don't know why, but maybe you will understand in the future. Emerald stopped swaying. Her tone became serious and serious. We only need to follow this rule. Hui suddenly said, "Will the people fighting in the north abide by this rule and regulation?" Emerald's face stiffened. Cold sweat appeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was very embarrassing. Emerald couldn't answer. It seemed that she didn't know how free the people in that area were. This also reminded them that if necessary, they could do something. That side. I only heard the report. Anyway, it said that the situation is not good. I don't know if they will abide by the agreement. Well, can we not talk about that side? I feel very worried. Looking at the girl who was talking about that side, Yinwashing felt helpless and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There's nothing to hide. Anyway, we're used to this kind of thing. You don't have to feel uncomfortable. We are more used to this kind of thing than you think. Of course, I also hate it and feel very helpless. Emerald stuck out her tongue and finally felt more natural. If you want to go to Glow, you can set off from the port in the west. I have already sent someone to remind the people at the port there. As for the guards and the like, she paused again. Her eyes swept across Feng Ling and the others. Her expression was subtle. I think you don't need guards, so I don't intend to arrange any. Hey, it's okay. We can kill our way there. Don't worry. Hui grinned and waved his hand. When we brought you back, we charged all the way through the Chaos Demon Wilderness. That's true. Emerald nodded. She suddenly stood up straight and bowed to them. Then I wish you all the best here. We still have to deal with a lot of messy things here. We may not be able to go to other places to explore in a short time, so we won't accompany you. Okay, then we will go on our own. See you again in the future. Hui nodded. Just as he turned around, he turned back like the wind. Hey, you have to be careful when you dig 3 feet into the ground. Don't make any big movements. We may not be able to come back in time to clean up the mess. Emerald smiled bitterly. I know, I will be careful. You guys are the ones who should be careful. Don't make too much noise so that we can hear your news from here, especially the news mixed with the explosion. Everyone, it seemed like this lass had already figured out the main movements of their group in a relatively short period of time. After leaping out of the western port of the high tower, they entered the next journey. What was ahead was still unknown, or rather, there were still many things in this world that were a question mark to them. It was not so easy to brush away the fog one by one and figure out the essence of these things. Yinwashing looked at Hui, who was standing at the bow of the ship with his left hand on his waist and his right hand pointing to the front as if he was leading the charge. After thinking for a while, she decided not to pay attention to someone who was posing like a statue. She turned her head and looked at Lu Xiaoqiu, who was looking at the energy map. I thought you would stay there? Hearing this, Lu Xiaoqiu moved her attention away from the map and shrugged at him. Although it is the capital of God, there is also a main hall. I can also stay there directly, but I'm not familiar with the place. It is boring to be familiar with you guys. Moreover, even if I want to go back, I have to wait for you to send me back. Emerald and the others are busy now. They don't have time to arrange for someone to send me back. Also, the risk will be much smaller if I follow you guys. She put on the familiar smile again, but this time it was not as perfunctory as before. She blinked her eyes at him. You will be responsible for sending me back, right? Actually, we usually don't turn back. Yin Nuashing mumbled subconsciously. Seeing this girl's expression stiffen, he hurriedly said, Of course, that's usually. Since you followed us, we'll definitely send you back. But we might have to wait until we're done with some trivial matters before we send you back. However, if you're in a hurry and really want to go back, why don't we send you back now? After all, you have experienced it yourself. Traveling with us often leads to accidents. I am fine. I'm not in a hurry to go back. I have also adapted to the things on the road. It is quite interesting to travel with you guys. The gray-haired girl stopped smiling and sighed subtly. It would be better if there were fewer accidents. This time, before leaving the capital of God, I brought some stomach medicine. I hope there will not be a time when I need to use it. Yin Nuashing laughed dryly. You are following the number 1 Void Force and the number 1 Void Prophet Emperor. Do you think there won't be any accidents? Is that possible? You have already rushed into the center of the vortex. Chapter 2000. The sky was clear, and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. At the end of the blue canopy, faint traces of green energy and some faint fog-like things could be seen. Those were things that existed on the zenith that was so far away that he did not know how far away it was. They were vapors floating on the lid of this caged world. It was easy to notice the difference when compared to an ordinary world. For example, he could not see the stars in the planetary system even if he stared until his eyeballs were about to pop out. That was because those were just textures hanging high in the sky, and there was no such thing as a real planetary system. This world was pieced together by a series of simple rules and concepts to form complex environmental conditions, and this layer of textures was one of them. Oh, there's also a prefix, surface environment. In fact, there were more things that were operating quietly in the dark. Those were things that were more important and more deadly. The big environment that truly dominated this world in the dark. These were directly related to the concept of rules. For example, the series of things that they were doing now had a high probability of being close to the roots of the world. A little carelessness would either cause the world to collapse or create something inexplicable. But that was already a basic operation for them. Whatever they did on the concept of rules, there were many things that caused the entire world to repeatedly jump on the edge of death. Of course, in the end, they still followed their usual pattern of doing things: thrilling, stormy, stable as a rock, calm as the wind and waves. When it was over, apart from scaring everyone and tormenting them to death, there was basically no real damage. That was the situation a long time ago. Anything that happened now would be pulled to the highest level. That's right, those two things. And if it involved the origin of the world or the chaos, it was basically impossible to protect everyone without getting hurt. When that time came, it would be like a clay bodhisattva crossing a river, unable to even protect himself. Even if he could come back from the dead, there was no way he could control everyone. Everyone could only do their best and leave everything to fate. As for what happened afterwards, he would either be in trouble or dead by then. Even if they wanted to find him, they could only talk to him who had turned into a ball, and he could not hear them at all. So why did he suddenly bring up such a tragic matter? This he also did not know. It was just a sudden feeling. Perhaps it was because he felt that the first thing that happened in the void was about to happen, or perhaps it was because his temples were throbbing and his right eyelid was fighting with his eyeball. These two things were causing him to be a little nervous. What are you looking at? Golden energy particles that were like afterglow suddenly floated in the air around him. A pair of pure white wings came into his line of sight and gently swayed in front of his eyes, causing him to turn his attention slightly. He moved his neck that was already stiff from looking up. When he looked down, he saw the little angel sitting on the side of the ship. She habitually waved her wings and wrapped him up. Her golden eyes were filled with curiosity as she looked at him. Yin Nuashing gently stroked her wings and pointed to the sky with her eyes. Looking at the lid of this world, try to find something unintentionally or deliberately placed in a corner where no one would notice. The little angel tilted her head, blinked her golden eyes, and asked for the follow-up. He sighed softly. For the time being, I saw something, but I can't identify what it is. It looks like a layer of cloud on top of the steamer. I haven't found anything yet. For the time being, I can only ignore it. Oh, she tilted her body and leaned her head on his chest. He smiled faintly. Why did you suddenly come here? I suddenly wanted to come here. She pursed her lips. Let's have a quiet rest. It's been too noisy these days. Nuashing thought so too. He thought for a moment and sat down beside her on the side of the ship. He put his arm around her waist and held her hand gently with his other hand. He tilted his head and leaned against her. Ah, this atmosphere, it's quiet and comfortable. But even without thinking, he knew that this atmosphere would only appear occasionally. It's hard to say when it will appear, and it's also hard to say when it will disappear. Looking at his big family gathering together, it's likely that CU will come in less than 2 minutes. Of course, we might also come to tease him, because there was never a lack of liveliness when everyone gathered together. The inadvertent silence would be quickly broken. He had gotten used to it. Well, it didn't matter. The occasional 1 or 2 minutes of silence were quite precious. Now, he just had to wait for time to pass slowly. When he was alone with them, there was a high chance that his mood would calm down. He couldn't explain why, but he also liked this kind of quiet moment. He didn't have to think about anything. Time would pass slowly, just like the carefree days in the realm of the gods. Under the high blue sky, as the ship swayed across the sky, the wind that broke the rules would occasionally crash into the airship and blow their long hair. It was peaceful and comfortable, as if it could last forever. Peace. When will we usher in true peace? Can we not care about that now? Just let this atmosphere be maintained for a while. Just a while. Foam! Foam! When Yin Nuashing heard Huey's call in a daze, she was slightly startled and came back to her senses. When she opened her eyes, she saw that the airship had already broken free of the rules and was moving forward rapidly. She didn't know when, but the airship had stopped moving. She focused her gaze for a while and saw Hui standing beside her, holding her shoulders and gently shaking her a few times. Behind him were CU and Blue Phoenix, who were carefully stretching their necks to look around. You're awake? We saw her open her eyes and smiled. We've arrived at our destination. We've arrived at the capital of God in the radiant light zone. Yin Nuashing's eyes widened, and her pupils shrank slightly. So fast. How long has it been? Hui laughed helplessly and used his eyes to point at the little angel, who was still leaning on him and sleeping soundly. He whispered, You sat next to her and relaxed and fell asleep. You don't even know it yourself. For days have already passed. If you tell me that you're lying to me, I'll forget about it. Unfortunately, you really did sleep for 4 days. Hui shrugged. Blue Phoenix and the others sat next to you, but seeing that you didn't wake up at all, he coughed dryly and sighed helplessly. Well, that's it. Yin Nuashing opened his mouth to say something, but in the end, he covered his mouth and yawned loudly. Everyone was stunned. He also had an embarrassed look on his face. It's over. After sleeping for a while, I seem to be even more tired. Everyone sighed in their hearts. This was the manifestation of the tiredness hidden deep in the soul, inadvertently leaking out. He had endured the pressure of 5 eras without releasing it. It had been accumulating in his heart, so that his spirit and soul could withstand it. It didn't mean that it was gone. At this time, he could only go back to the factory for a major repair. But a trip back to the factory would be, many years. What? The 20 years of lying down after tormenting the source law? Although he had been lying down for 20 years, he was dealing with the concept-level wounds. The two offset each other and did not change at all. He had just used 20 years of lying on the floor in exchange for the source law. His soul was still as weak as it was when he woke up. 20 years was just to offset the price of tormenting the source law. There were still 5 years before. It was not like they would go to the sanctum of origin or the sanctum of creation from time to hang themselves up for a while. It did not matter whether they had broken through or not. The main thing was that they gave themselves a major repair, and their soul would be refreshed. It was not like he was a fragile physical body. He could sleep and pretend that nothing had happened. This guy's soul was already deformed from the pressure. Look at him now. He kept yawning after waking up. It made them want to yawn as well. Yin Nuoxing rubbed her eyes and subconsciously wanted to yawn again. She immediately raised her hand and slapped herself. Slap. Yes, I'm awake. Everyone was speechless. No, no. He skillfully shifted the little angel, who had not yet woken up, so that she could wrap her arms around his neck. Then he folded her wings around his body and wrapped the two of them together. After making sure that the wrapping was flawless, that she did not float up, and that her long dress was not fluttering. Then he nodded and looked at everyone. Let's go. Huey's face twitched twice. Looking at his red cheeks, he said, Do you want to wash your face and rest for a while? Let's go. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes at him and took the lead to disembark from the ship and walk towards the port of the tower. They had already entered the city. The capital of God of Glow was not as lively as before. It was no wonder that he did not notice anything before he was shaken awake. As soon as he led the others down the ship, he suddenly turned his head. So what are we going to do again? Everyone said, Do you want to rest for a while? The only one who was confused was a guy who had been accumulating pressure for 5 years. The more pressure he accumulated, the more he pushed himself to the brink of death. Although he had slapped himself in the face, the road ahead was still a little unsteady. This might be the reason why he never rested. He accidentally slept for a while and was so confused that he was about to float. But we squinted at Maple and whispered to see you in a low voice. Didn't you guys drag him asleep for a night a few days ago? Why didn't I see him so confused at that time? So you thought seriously for a moment. Probably because Little Star fell asleep in a combat state that day, so he didn't really sleep. We understood in a second. Maple was dragged in with the mentality of defending his chastity to the death. The nature of the situation was different. It would be a miracle if he could sleep well. It might be better to say that he might be more tired after lying down for a night. TSK, to sum it up, this guy needed to inadvertently create a moment of rest. The conditions were too high. He remembered the few days when he was in the tertiary realm. After wandering in a daze for a while, Yin Nuoxing finally came back to her senses. Lu Xiaoqiu reminded her a few words and reminded her why they came to the capital of God of Radiance. They were looking for Mu Tsung-Yuan and the others. They wanted to hear if they had done anything in this area. Mu Tsung-Yuan and the others have set off for the large area in the north of Radiance. Based on their speed, they should have successfully crossed the Chaos Demon Wilderness yesterday. The manager of the main hall calmly told them this piece of news that made them a little dumbfounded, catching them off guard. The manager took out a purifying magic stone and handed it to Yin Nuoxing. Mu Tsung-Yuan has already mentioned your matter to us. He said that if you came, he would give you this part of the information that he left behind in advance. They will wait for you at the marked location. Yin Nuoxing took the purifying magic stone in a daze. She glanced at it and threw it to Lu Xiaoqiu. She continued to ask the manager, Did he say anything else? Did you find anything in the radiance? The manager shook his head gently. We mobilized all our forces and swept the entire radiance in the shortest time possible. Unfortunately, we didn't find anything similar to the nature of the center of the quiet wasteland in the report. Mu Tsung-Yuan also embarked on the journey to explore other areas. We felt that something was wrong. We should have arrived at the same time, right? How come you've already done everything? The manager glanced at them and said, If I'm not mistaken, your airship seems to be a standard civilian airship? Lu Xiaoqiu shrunk her neck and nodded. Because we borrowed it. We left the capital of God in a hurry and forgot to change it. Oh, Mu Tsung-Yin and the others used a combat airship with speed specialization. Its speed is 13 times faster than your civilian airship. They had already returned here on the day they left the dark region. We also began to do various things on the same day. Oh, that makes sense. That sounds a little awkward. The manager waved at a temple warrior behind him. The latter nodded and disappeared like the wind. Half a minute later, he rushed back like the wind and handed something to the manager. The manager handed the thing that he had just touched to Yin Nuoxing. The latter took it and looked at it. It was a model of a ship made of purifying magic stone. He immediately understood. He nodded and handed it to Lu Xiaoqiu. He felt that he had already casually regarded the girl as the captain of their group. Thank you. Since they are not here, we have to hurry and catch up with them. I don't know why they suddenly left in such a hurry. The manager nodded. We will continue to explore things related to the wasteland fissure, not only in this large area, but also in other areas that have been explored and across the sea from the Chaos Wasteland. Hopefully, there will be a good result here. Then, I wish you a safe journey, Guardian of the Will. May your existence return the deviated orbit of the world to its normal position. Yin Nuoxing listened to him and looked at him meaningfully. He smiled faintly. Although I dare not directly guarantee anything, there are some things that we will not do. We will just watch. After hurriedly passing by the capital of God, the group once again galloped towards the north of the Radiant without stopping. When they left the capital of God, Yin Nuoxing had been watching the city. It was not until the airship began to accelerate and the space became blurry. Its figure was hidden in the chaotic space and could no longer be seen that he withdrew his gaze. Little star, what he said just now seemed to have some other meaning. See, you asked curiously. Yin Nuoxing shrugged. Who knows? Maybe it does have some meaning, or maybe it doesn't. It's just like the words that are still being passed down. It's like the words that are said to the Guardian of the Will. There are many possibilities. It's not worthwhile to delve into it. They were still a little confused about this so-called Guardian of the Will. The only thing they were certain of was that he was definitely not the Guardian of the Will. That was a special product of this world. He was just an outsider who accidentally triggered some kind of judgment mechanism that existed in this world. Because of that, the life forms here were able to identify him as the Guardian of the Will. In short, he was not the original Guardian of the Will. He was just an imposter who accidentally stepped into a similar realm and caused everyone to misjudge him. However, from the level of the void, he should be able to do what the Guardian of the Will of this world could do. After all, this was just a strange and incomplete world. Their position in the void was higher than the life forms in this world. Unless something happened, there would not be any trouble that could hold them back. After changing to a new airship, their speed could be said to be as fast as lightning. Lu Xiaoqiu was a little excited about the new airship and could not help but speed it with all her might. Along the way, the demonized life forms basically crashed into them without even looking at them. Anyway, with the protection of the Radiant, it only took them a day and a half to cross the Chaos Demon Wilderness and arrive at another large area that was isolated from the world. The place they arrived at was at the intersection of plains and mountains that looked nothing out of the ordinary from high altitude. Because it was a new area that was completely dark, they did not have an exact destination. First, they let Lu Xiaoqiu drift slowly towards the place designated by Mu Songyuan. At the same time, they contacted I Ching and the others who had been wandering in this area for some time. Little Qingzi, we're already here. How's the situation here? Is there anything interesting? Oh, Lord Hui, this is really a bad time. There's definitely something going on, but it's not interesting. That bastard over there, I see you. Stop right there. Don't think I don't know that you just threw a brick at the back of my head. I'm going to press you into the void and take a shower. Shit you. Everyone. F***CK. What happened to make him so agitated? There was a series of clinking sounds that made one's heart tired. After listening for a while, they felt that there was no intention of stopping. Just as they were about to block the spiritual communication and let I Ching and the others fight for a while, the latter's panting voice immediately came through. Phew! I'm sorry, Lord Hui. There's a small matter here, but I'm backing out now. Hui smiled bitterly for a while. So what have you been doing here for the past few days? Why are you suddenly fighting with others? I Ching was silent for a while. Then he let out a long sigh. It's not that I fought with them. It's those bastards who dragged us into this. Damn those bastards. Everyone in this area is crazy. Everyone is sick. Definitely sick. Must be seriously sick. Can you imagine that when they're fighting among themselves, they'll actually borrow the power of the demonized life forms to attack other people's lairs? Oh my God, this battlefield. I think that once a torrent of energy blasts down, there won't be a single accidental casualty. Everyone was speechless. With just one sentence, they knew how crazy this was. This was equivalent to a bunch of chaos spawns who didn't look too smart rushing into a domestic violence incident in the world of order. They were immediately swept into the storm and used as tools for internal strife. Without a brain thrombosis from 10 eras, they probably wouldn't be able to do something like this. The situation here might be more serious because the accumulated power of the demonized life forms here was enough to cause the phenomenon of a generation gap. As far as they knew, it had happened a few times in history. In other words, it was about a group of order life forms wandering into the void of chaos and being surrounded by chaos life forms while they were busy fighting among themselves. It was obvious that they did not want to live anymore. They just did not know what to say. Just hearing about this situation made them feel very tired. By the way, Lord Hui, we saw that group of people who came in with you. There are quite a lot of them. There's a few thousand here and there. I don't know if they're all here. Yin, Nuashing, and Hui looked at each other and widened their eyes. They had almost forgotten about that group of people. They did not expect to see them here. I Ching's side was filled with clanging sounds. Even though he had retreated from the battlefield, he was probably still on the battlefield looking at the countless bursts of energy. After a while, he suddenly sighed faintly. I thought I had seen everything in my life. Well, I've seen everything related to the origin of things, and I also know about the concept body of chaos. I'm already used to those traders from the underworld joining the chaos and rushing at us. But, there are still many things worth exploring in this life. I've never seen such a scene before. Well, this was just like how they could not imagine the scene of order life forms dragging chaos spawns into an internal conflict. They thought that the situation I Ching was seeing now was probably similar to this. In short, they let I Ching continue to be involved in the chaotic whirlpool over there. They had to first figure out what was going on in this godforsaken place, and what was the basis for all these things. It was just that they could not understand. After arriving at the location marked by Mu Tsungen, Lu Xiaoqiu spread out the energy of the airship. Not long after, a figure quickly flew up from the forest below. Before the person arrived, he hurriedly said, "Quickly put away the airship and hide." The person who came was naturally Mu Tsungen, who had worked together with him before. At this moment, his face was full of nervousness and a little sneaky, as if he was a thief. When they saw him, they were startled. Before they could ask anything, the group hurriedly jumped off the airship, put away the airship, and followed him into the dense forest below. Then they hid their auras. Perhaps it was because he was too nervous, Yin Nuashing, Hui, and the group took turns to set up hundreds of layers of energy barriers, shielding, defensive, counterattacking. In short, no matter what happened, it was always right to put on a layer of shields first. Although it's a little urgent, it's not to the extent of... Shoo! Mu Tsungen laughed dryly when he saw what they were doing, but his expression immediately changed, and he waved his hand to silence them. Seeing that, everyone covered their mouths and held their breaths. Suddenly, a large swarm of shadows appeared in the empty sky as various airships of various sizes appeared here. They were all airships that they had seen before, but they looked slightly different. Perhaps they had been modified and adjusted. After a careful count, there were more than 100 airships here and there. Apart from those airships, there were also 1,000 or 2,000 dazzling white silhouettes flying around in all directions. They were constantly emitting energy waves that landed in the forest and rapidly spread into the distance. They had only seen the light chasers once, during the battle at Abysmal Moon City. They believed that they were an effective and convenient force for humans to use against demonized life forms. As they were a type of energy derivative, it was not difficult to create them as long as there was the method and the energy. Having them in the battle against demonized life forms would greatly reduce the loss of living forces and also greatly increase their own forces. In short, it was a good thing. They just didn't know why this fleet had suddenly appeared here. They had just arrived, and this fleet had arrived right after them. Then, they immediately launched a carpet search. It would be unreasonable to say that there was no connection between the two. Yin Nuoxing's face suddenly twitched. She quickly stood up and dragged Mu Songyuan into the depths of the forest. Energy gathering. Let's go. They're about to fire. Hey, if we move now. Mu Songyuan was shocked, but before he could finish, he was dragged away by Hui. It's fine, it's fine. We were just cooperating with you to hide. Actually, look at the hundreds of layers of barriers. They won't be able to find us even if we were standing here. It's just that we saw that they were gathering energy and were about to attack, so we quickly left. We don't want to dirty our clothes. Mu Songyuan was stunned. Less than a minute after they left the forest unhurriedly, the fleet suddenly unleashed a series of shockingly powerful energy attacks on the forest below them. The saturated energy bombardment covered the land like raindrops, instantly destroying countless trees below and blasting a huge crater tens of thousands of miles across. The energy bombardment lasted for almost 5 minutes before it stopped. They thought that it was 5 minutes of low-quality fireworks. Then, the fleet that had suddenly arrived suddenly left. They felt baffled from beginning to end. They came out for no reason, vented their anger for no reason, and then left for no reason. Speaking of which, they bombarded us without saying anything. We should take it as a declaration of war, right? Ning Fei could not help but say, in theory, it shouldn't be a problem for us to wipe them all out with the energy torrent just now. Yeah, that's true. Yin Nuoxing shrugged and let out a long sigh. He had been holding back his anger ever since he knew that something bad was about to happen in this region. Now is the time to let out. But there's no rush. Let's first figure out what's going on in this region. There will always be a chance to fight. Chapter 2001. The forest that had been inexplicably set ablaze was set ablaze, and it began to spread in all directions. Billowing smoke began to rise into the sky, and the forest began to be filled with an unpleasant smell. The group of fellows who had suddenly appeared and set fire to the forest, and then left suddenly seemed to have suddenly seen a walking third-class merit officer. They immediately charged forward to look for trouble, but when they arrived at their destination, they did not even see a ghost. They could only vent their anger and leave while cursing. Looking at how they did not clean up after venting their anger, it was obvious that these fellows did not usually pay attention to greenery. They did not know how to extinguish the fire before leaving, and even needed their help to extinguish the fire. After casually restraining the spreading energy shock waves and suppressing the forest fire, the group waited for a while. The fleet did not seem to have any intention of coming back and did not appear again. So they followed Mu Tsingin and flew into the depths of the forest. After jumping and shuttling through the mountains for a long time, they stopped halfway up a small mountain. This place was remote and had natural obstacles. It was also a place where the energy flow was relatively fast, so it was easy to clean up the traces. The concealment was very good, but this did not prevent them from adding a lot of barriers on top of the existing energy barriers. It was just a habit. Inside the barrier was a small camp that was casually set up. Mu Songyuan's group of friends were all here. They looked fine, but their expressions were a little depressed and resentful. Mu Songyuan's return made his group of friends come back to their senses and look up. When they saw the group of people who had acted together before slowly walking in, their spirits lifted a little. Lan Lan had just stood up to greet Mu Songyuan, but when she turned her head and saw Feng Ling, her pretty face turned pale with fright. When the latter saw her big reaction, she cried out in her heart. She had not been able to suppress the annihilation energy for the past few days. She quickly suppressed the annihilation energy that was running around in her body and packed it away. She hurriedly said, "Don't vomit. Don't vomit. I'm holding it down. I'm really holding it down. You'll be fine if you look at it again." Lan Lan's expression instantly returned to normal. She stuck out her tongue and felt a little embarrassed. When the two groups saw this, they did not know whether to laugh or cry. Although they had seen it once before, they still did not know what kind of expression to show when they saw it again. We didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He patted Feng's shoulder and said, "I don't think you and this girl are compatible." Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes at him. There's so many people who are incompatible with me in this world. Or rather, there are many people who are compatible with me. However, I've never seen anyone who is incompatible with me to the point of being able to recognize me just by looking at me. We patted him on the shoulder again and skipped the topic. He looked at Mu Tsung-yin and the others who had pulled out tables and chairs for them. So, why are you hiding in such a desolate place? Aren't you here to investigate this area? At the mention of this matter, Mu Tsung-yin and the others looked a little worried. Even their actions of retrieving things slowed down. There was no need to think about it. They must have encountered a few bad things. Speaking of which, I really don't know how to put it. The 7-foot-tall young man in their team covered his face with his hands and sighed deeply. The complexity of this place is far beyond our imagination. Even though I already felt that it was very complicated when I came here 15 years ago, I didn't expect that after 15 years, it would be even more complicated. We already have a rough idea of the situation. After settling the group of girls on the table, Yin Nuoxing crossed her arms and leaned against the air. You're talking about a few bad things between the demonized creatures and the human race, right? But what do you mean by even more complicated? Mu Tsung-yin scratched his head. That's because a group of people with powerful combined powers suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Their personal strength is nothing to be afraid of, as they're all at reciprocity, but the strange combined powers they use can strengthen several hundred or even thousands of primeval immortals. Because of this group of 20,000 people, the already chaotic region has become even more chaotic. Yin Nuoxing and the others were speechless. If they guessed correctly, they should know what was going on with these 20,000 people. However, it was really hard to say. Once they said it, the topic would be endless. So it was fine as long as they knew what was going on. They didn't expect that they would end up in this place. Moreover, it seemed that they had already gathered and couldn't wait to start a war here, dragging this area into it. However, the unique powers of the three sides of the primordial realm were actually able to increase the strength of the primordial realm through reciprocity. It seemed that their nature was quite advanced. They had only roughly looked at it before and hadn't completely analyzed it. Therefore, they didn't know about this matter. In short, a group of inexplicable people got involved here. They're like shit stirrers, making the already messy place even messier, Hui said with a nod. It's not a group of people. Mu Tsung-yin shook his head with a serious expression. It's two sides. They seem to be opposing each other. Two sides? Aren't there three sides? Forget it. They didn't care about that for the time being. In short, they knew this. However, they could only cooperate and pretend to be speechless. Hui thought for a moment and said, "Tell us about this place in detail. We were all very confused when we first arrived, especially when we heard this strange internal strife." Mu Tsung-yin nodded and took a deep breath. He seemed to be deliberating over his words. After a while, he slowly said, "But I don't know where to start." Everyone was speechless. That's true. This place was already so chaotic that even they could only find a corner to hide in. After the matter was over, they would decide what to do next. It was probably a problem whether they could obtain any information or not. Well, I'll give you a rough explanation. Mu Tsung-yin laughed dryly for a while. He took out a demon cleansing stone and placed it on the table. A map of this large area appeared in the space in front of him. He slowly explained the information they had obtained when they were chased out 15 years ago and when they came in this time. This large area is more than 10 times larger than the place we are in. It is still an area surrounded by the Chaos Devil Wilderness. They have eroded and spread into this area from all directions. Some flow like rivers, while others stop and become lakes. In terms of the proportion of the area, 30% of this area should have been eroded by the Chaos Devil Wilderness. However, the isolation of the area is not serious. The Chaos Devil Wilderness has spread in from many directions, and it has not closed off the border. It has not isolated any area and turned it into an island in the sea. Mu Tsung-yin paused for a moment, then pointed to the south end of the map that was neither round nor flat. Our current location is in the south of this large area. The South and West are a large group of chaotic areas that fight for themselves. The vast land is dotted with countless organizations and forces. There is no unity. Just taking 2 steps out of the door might accidentally cross several territories. The division of the region even includes the area that the Chaos Devil Wilderness has spread into. As for the North, it is the largest area in this large area. Although it is also called the Northern Region, it actually has its own name, Twilight. You can see the actual area it occupies. Most of the northern area extends to the west, occupying a third of the territory that should be the Western Region. There are rumors that they have even placed a city in the Chaos Devil Wilderness. The latter part sounded horrifying. Putting aside whether there were great demons and demonized life forms in the Chaos Devil Wilderness, the main reason it was plucked out was because the environment there was another kind of energy, demonized energy. It was not an energy that ordinary life forms could casually come into contact with. Those who rashly came into contact with it had already disappeared at the other end of the wasteland crevice. Ahem, even if they had a way to purify it, but living next to the mouth of an active volcano and seeing the crimson magma below every day and spreading poisonous gases into the air after living in such an environment for a long time, even if they did not burn to death on the spot, they would be poisoned to death, right? That's what it meant. Even if the people living there would not be demonized by the demonized energy, it was not a good thing for ordinary people to be exposed to negative energy for a long time. After all, it was also a matter on the level of order. Being exposed to energies that were different from their own order for a long time, except for higher life forms with corresponding protection, all life forms of other levels would not be able to withstand it, and the end result would be either madness or stupidity. It was the same logic as them being exposed to chaos energy for a long time. Even Maple was backstabbed by the chaos concept body once, let alone others. Twilight in the north occupies the largest territory. They are currently at war with the eastern region to the north where we are. This is the largest region apart from Twilight, and the territories of both sides are bordering on the north. There are also many territories of various sizes on the border above. They are probably living in an abyss of suffering every day on the line of war between the two behemoths. It seems that because there is no need to deal with them, neither side has the intention to take them down and conveniently use it as a buffer zone. We pointed to the west, the middle part, and a large expanse of land in the south. What about these places? Are they not involved in the conflict between the two behemoths? Oh, the rest of the territories are just bystanders. Everyone was speechless. Ahem, just kidding. Mu Tsung-en laughed and said, "At present, the biggest impact is the battle between Twilight in the north and the eastern region in the east. The two of them together occupy about 60% of the territory, and the remaining 40% is the same as the south where we are. A lot of regions, organizations, and forces are fighting for their own sake. When they are free, they are fighting against demonized life forms, and when they are not free, they are fighting each other. When they temporarily stop fighting and make peace, it is because they see that the battle between the north and the east has expanded and the movement of the battlefield is too big. So they quickly stop fighting, reorganize their troops, and then sit in a row and wait for them to finish fighting before continuing to fight." Everyone was speechless. This was very wise to protect oneself. There are not many restrictions in these places. It has always been like this. Mu Tsung-yuan sighed and rubbed his forehead, looking like he had a headache. He knew that it was almost time for the main event, and his spirits were lifted. Has there been any change? Well, the northern region has recently decided to intervene in the remaining uninvolved territories. Countless territories, large and small, have been annexed. The fleet we saw just now is also from the northern region. They have imposed a blockade on a relatively large area of this area. You can say that they are forcing people to take sides. Those who comply are fine, but those who dare to resist, well, as far as we know, don't have any good endings. After the blockade order was issued, many people were either forced or voluntarily joined the northern region, and some took advantage of the fact that the blockade order was not perfected to join the eastern region. However, this is only in the early stages. Later on, when the blockade is perfected, this kind of thing will no longer happen. However, there are still some who have not taken sides and intend to watch. They're being madly targeted and pressured by the northern region. If they really wanted to fight, it would only take a while. Well, it was hard to say. Other than the two regions, there were still 40% of the territories. There were too many people and too many eyes. It would take a lot of effort to clean them up. Moreover, since they were talking about territories, there were so many troublesome things to deal with. Just conquering them was not enough. They still had to manage them. If they did not manage them well, there would be fires and uprisings in the backyard every day when they were fighting in the front. It would be so annoying. The blockade order is now in place. No one is allowed to enter or leave this area. In fact, you were already noticed when you first appeared. The people who rushed over were the ones who imposed the blockade. It doesn't look like much. We scratched his cheek. They came quickly, but they couldn't even find us standing right under their noses. They even had to use a saturation bombing to clear the area. Aren't they too unprepared? It's better to say that they didn't prepare at all. They just opened the door and looked at us with their eyes. Mu Songyuan and the others smiled bitterly. It was not that they were useless, but that they were slightly abnormal. Normal people would not be able to withstand this kind of thing. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a while. Are the two regions carrying out the blockade at the same time? Or the northern region is the one carrying out the blockade order? The eastern region doesn't have the time to do such a thing. They have to use all their strength just to deal with the northern region's attack. They can't do anything else. Mu Songyuan tapped his arm and sighed. The northern region is only able to occupy so many territories because they are especially strong. In this large region, the strength of a territory can be measured by the size of its territory. Countless large and small territories change, and countless forces rise, and decline happen every day. However, only the northern and eastern regions remain unchanged. It is said that this has been going on for many years. In recent years, the eastern region has also begun to decline, which gave the northern region the opportunity to attack. Oh, okay. Yin Nuoxing slowly stood up and ended the conversation with little Qingzi through their souls. She nodded and said to everyone, "Let's go to the eastern region." Everyone, our people are over there. Little Qingzi is also there. Oh, not that little Qingzi. I mean Shu Qing and the others. I heard from Yi Qing that they have gathered everyone while we were causing trouble. It took them a lot of effort. Yin Nuoxing said. We stood up and patted his pants. Then let's go. We'll go to the eastern region. But there is still the blockade order. Mu Songyuan hurriedly said. It is difficult for ordinary people to pass through the blockade, let alone go to the eastern region. They will be stopped before they can even pass through the gate. Hui raised his eyebrows. Difficult? Does that mean there is still a chance? There is indeed a way. Mu Songyuan smiled bitterly. He patted his head and said in a helpless voice, either you choose to join the northern region, where you hand over a troublesome magic crystal or magic cleansing stone. I calculated the amount that we have to hand over. It will probably take us 2 or 3 years in the Chaos Demon Wilderness to save up. Oh, and with you guys, it will double. TSK, let's go and see the situation first. We waved his hand and took the lead to walk out without a care. The rules should be followed when it is necessary. Mu Songyuan was stunned. These words were strange. He felt that they were not words that they would say. Yin Nuoxing saw the strange expression on the young man's face and translated for him. It means that if we follow their rules, they will also have to follow ours. Our rules are very simple. We don't expect anyone to help us. As long as they don't cause trouble, don't hinder us, and don't block our way, it will be fine. The things we want to do will rarely involve others. Even if it does, we will find a way to bypass it or try not to affect others. With this as the premise, if there is still someone blocking our way, we held the back of his head with both hands and turned to them with a bright smile. Then we don't intend to follow the rules. Mu Songyuan smiled bitterly for a while. But even if we don't follow the rules, the northern region is much stronger than we thought. I did a little calculation. Even if we combine all the forces of the 4 regions, we are still no match for them. TSK, don't worry. We came prepared. You have seen our fighting strength in the quiet wasteland last time, and that is only a part of what you know. Well, a part, probably not more than 1 in a million or 1 in tens of millions. Hui shook his head and pointed at phone with his chin. By the way, in this 1 in a million, all of us add up to that one. The rest of the numbers belong to this guy. Yin Nuashing was very excited when she was pointed out. She rolled up her sleeves and immediately said, "What? Do you mean you want me to make a move? You want me to make a move? Now, right here?" Everyone was shocked. You are not allowed to make a move. You can't make a move first. Do you want to tear down this world? TSK, Mu Tsungyin and the others. They were suddenly very curious about the nature of the forbidden Fengling that made them so vigilant. But when they thought about his identity as the guardian of the will, it didn't seem like they couldn't understand. Hui wiped the sweat from his forehead and quickly turned to look at them. "I'll go with you. If you see Fengling about to make a move, don't care about anything. Don't look at anything. Just turn around and run. Run as hard as you can. Run as far as you can. Never, never. Don't stop on the way." Why do I feel like you're talking about him? As if he's a natural disaster. Everyone nodded vigorously. It's not like he's a calamity, and a void-level calamity at that. That's a calamity that can easily tear down the void. A bunch of inexperienced brats. You better pray that you don't see the scene of him sweeping the entire world with a buzz, or else it will leave a very scary psychological shadow. Quite a number of people at the front line have been beaten into psychopaths by his 3 styles, and now they can scream and show a satisfied expression when the 3 styles of nothingness explodes. Every one of them is sick and far from the norm. There was originally a small city in the blockade area leading to the eastern region, but after the blockade order was issued, this place was the first to be completely sealed off and occupied by the forces of the northern region. Now, it was just a checkpoint. What was the purpose of setting up this place? God knows. Maybe they were fishing. They clearly didn't allow anyone to join the eastern region, so sealing off this area was used to weaken and restrict the forces of the eastern region. Why not just station a fleet here and directly prohibit everyone from approaching? Otherwise, it would be treated as an act of hostility or something. Yes, why? Hui nodded with his arms crossed. Because they're fishing. They don't use force. They even leave a path for you. There's no need to say what kind of people would choose to go to the eastern region at this time. Yes, they don't need to listen to others. They just need to think that anyone who passes through here is from the eastern region, and treat everyone who passes as enemies, and that's it. With the troublesome purifying magic stones and magic crystals that you mentioned, I can even come up with a plan to plunder everyone clean, let them pass, and quietly kill them. If even someone like me, who doesn't use my brain, could think of it, do you think they could? Mu Tsungyin was dumbfounded. Isn't that too sinister? That's nothing. That's nothing. We've seen even more treacherous people. They can trick others into betraying you, yet you still have to support them. They even want you to treat them as your only faith and spiritual pillar, working your life and sacrificing your soul for them. The 7-foot-tall lad's eyes bulged. That's not fun, but what happened to them after that? After that, Hui thought for a moment and pointed at phone with his thumb. He slapped them all into the ground. They couldn't even dig them out. That's called tragic. Yin Nuashing was a little stunned when he heard that because he couldn't figure it out even after thinking for a long time. Then, he thought carefully and said, "Oh, at that time, you said you couldn't handle it or something. Then, you suddenly asked me to clean up a place and didn't let anyone go. Was it that time?" Yes. Actually, there were a few people who were quite powerful at that time. Didn't you notice? I didn't notice at all. It's just a slap. Everyone. These two really. One dared to ask for help, and the other dared to attack. The one who attacked didn't care about anything and just slapped them into the ground. Damn. Pass was now a ladder-shaped city. Well, according to its scale, it might be better to call it a small town or a small village. After all, it was a narrow and long city with a length of 30 to 40,000 miles and a width of less than 10,000 miles. As for the fleet mentioned just now, there was indeed a fleet here. Tens of thousands of airships were hovering in the sky above this small city. They looked the same as the airships they had seen before. They came in all sizes, except for the small details on the edges and corners. Then, they were branded, a mark that looked like half an apple wrapped in a leaf at first glance. There seemed to be no problem going in and out of the small city. There wasn't even a guard at the gate. They just wandered in casually. It wasn't until they reached the streets that they saw many warriors from the northern region standing guard or patrolling. Their uniform was no longer the familiar uniform of the warriors of the Great Temple. Instead, it was a set of leather armor. Well, it was brown, gray, or black. It was a leather armor made of 3 colors. It looked like leather armor, but in fact, it should be made of magic crystals. Their leather armor still has remnants of demonic energy. We looked at those warriors who were either holding spears in their hands or had weapons hanging on their waists or on their backs. Looking at their attire, he couldn't help but be startled. He whispered, "Are they made directly from magic crystals and not purified? Can they do such a thing?" This seems to be possible in theory. Mu Tsung-yin frowned slightly. But if they don't control or purify the demonic energy in the magic crystals before using them, it is easy to be eroded by the demonic energy. It is also difficult to control the energy. That proves that they can control the energy. Yin Nuoxing said without thinking. Since there is something in this region that can make the demonic life forms fight on the battlefield, it is not surprising that it has something to do with the demonic life forms. If you say that they have a way to control the demonic life forms, I would believe it. There were many warriors guarding the streets, and a large group of airships hovering in the sky. The defense here could be said to be tight. As for this small city at the border, they could see that it was a place for business. It was also a hub connected by several main roads that could lead to the eastern region and the northern region. It was just that its location was closer to the eastern region. Originally, these neutral places had exchanges with the 2 regions. Now that the situation between the 2 regions had suddenly deteriorated and the 2 regions were locked in a fierce battle, these places were controlled and used as border crossings. The battle between the upper echelons had little to do with the ordinary people for the time being. They still had to live their lives, so these places couldn't be sealed off just like that. The sealing was just to create as much trouble for the enemy as possible. It would prevent people from going to the eastern region, and also prevent people from the eastern region who might be in the sealed area from going back to help. Unless the battle had already evolved into a destructive one, at that time, no one would care about anything and no longer care about the territory. They would just blow everything up regardless of the situation. At that time, there would naturally be no such border crossings. Chapter 2002. The small city was built along the long, slanted stairs and slopes. The buildings seemed to extend from both sides of the long slope. The slope and stairs were the main body. Since the slope was not very steep, there were also buildings built along the slope without the need for platforms. Some buildings were built using purifying magic stones or some kind of energy crystal to support a triangular platform, or simply placed there without any support. The front of the building was in a slanted state, and the entrance was also slanted. Looking at the slanted building, he could not help but feel that if he slept in the house at night, when he woke up, he would be surrounded by people at the bottom of the slope of the small city wrapped in a quilt and pointed at him. However, there weren't many of these slanted buildings. Most of them were located on the streets that divided the slope into several streets. Most of the buildings were built on terraces that were separated by dozens of steps. Although there were a lot of soldiers on Fleet Street, the atmosphere here was only slightly tense. It wasn't to the point of panic yet. As mentioned earlier, most of the people here were ordinary people. The peddlers continued to set up their stalls, and the merchants continued to do their business. For them, the only thing they couldn't go to the eastern region. Compared to the choice of going north or east in the past, they had one less option to go east. However, they still had to live their lives. Oh, look at this heavily guarded pass. There is no blind spot in the surveillance. As they walked up the slope, we bought a bunch of skewers from a stall. He patted Maple on the shoulder and stuffed the skewers into his mouth when Maple was not paying attention. What are you going to do now? Do you want to go head on? Or do you want to sneak in? Or, Nuashing rolled his eyes. He took a bite of the skewer and passed it to see you. Let's take a look first. It's a good thing if we can get there safely. He looked around. They had only walked for a short distance, but he felt like he had been scanned by hundreds of eyes several times. Most of the surveillance was hidden very well. They kept scanning them, probably because there were too many of them. Walking in a row on the street made it look like a large group of people was out on a trip. Although from the reports I heard, we probably won't be able to get there safely. Let's find someone to ask about the situation. Before he could finish his sentence, Hui rushed out like a gust of wind with a bunch of skewers in his hand. He was chatting with an old man on the street who had a bird on his shoulder. Yo, lad, a new face that I've never seen before. Hey, you want to leave this place and go to the eastern region or the northern region? Hiss, that's going to be difficult. If you guys were here a few days ago, you could still go to the northern region. I heard that something bad or someone had sneaked into the northern region and caused a huge commotion. As a result, even the road to the northern region is now blocked. Now, we can only go back the way we came from. We stared at the old man. You're not allowed to go to either place? Oh, that's not it. It seems that it's still possible to leave the gateway town and go to the northern region, but the requirements have been raised a lot because of the last incident. It will take a lot of effort to pass through. Hee. You know what that means. As for the more specific situation, I suggest you go up and take a look. I haven't been there for a while, and I don't know if the rules have been changed. It's been a few days since I asked about the news there. I haven't been there for a while now. The news did not sound like good news at first. Someone made a firework in the northern region, and the source was this place. So, the security was strengthened. No wonder. The last time I was here, there wasn't such a large fleet. I only heard that the remaining 40% of the area was sealed due to the tense situation. Well, now, the past town is still the past town, but with the addition of a fleet, it has become a heavily guarded place where no one is allowed to pass. Mu Songyuan whispered inside. What should we do now? Although we have to go and take a look ourselves, it's almost impossible for me to continue going from here. Yin Nuashing asked, Is there any other way? No. There's no main road leading to the eastern region from other places. Although you don't need to follow the main road, you'll be watched by the people in the northern region from those places until you reach the next place. The people who are watched by them are already quite a distance away from the northern region. Basically, they'll only stop watching you when you reach the next city or town. From those places to the eastern region, you'll have to cross the war zone. Mu Tsangyin shook his head. Only the area closest to the eastern region has a path to the eastern region on the surface. The narrow and long blockade line is also filled with heavy troops from the northern region. There are also constantly patrolling patrols near the blockade line and within this region. The success rate of breaking through by force isn't too high. Hui had just walked back and was a little stunned when he heard what Mu Tsongyuan said. How do you know so clearly? Mu Tsongyuan smiled bitterly. We were driven back from the northern region last time. Yes, we were driven back all the way to the south. Even if 15 years have passed, looking at the current situation, I don't think there will be any changes. Everyone immediately let out an "oh." This was an experienced fellow. Yin Nuashing felt a little strange. Why were you driven back? Do they know that you came from another region? Mu Tsongyuan was silent. He frowned for a while before he whispered, There is no great shrine in the northern region. Everyone was startled and frowned. Everyone thought carefully. Oh, they seemed to understand what was going on. The great shrines and headquarters of the past have all been replaced. Although they're still using the power of the great shrines, they're no longer the people of the past. As for who the people who took over are, we don't know. We only know that they are very strong in all aspects. This is the information we found when we were still in the northern region. We were only able to find out this much before we were driven out. We were driven out because there's no great shrine in the northern region. When we mentioned the name of the great shrine, Hui. Oh, I see. Mu Tsongyuan smiled bitterly. Hui continued, Then there are still a lot of independent regions in the southern and eastern regions that have great shrines. At the very least, I've heard that there are still a large number of major shrines left in the eastern region. However, it's said that the situation here is different from the major shrines that we're familiar with. As for the southern region, well, the southern region is far too chaotic. While we were running around, we only occasionally saw major shrines. Some of the major shrines even have different uniforms and systems. Only the names are still the same, but their true nature, well, they've become something else entirely. All that's left behind is a shell. The members of the major shrines, helping each other, have become nothing more than empty words. After all, they're no longer real members of the major shrines. It's impossible to count on the people who took over the major shrines and changed their nature to follow the rules. Mutsun sighed bitterly and rubbed his eyebrows. Every time we go to those places, there's always a sense of separation. It is also because of this reason that we changed into our own clothes when we returned from this large region 15 years ago. We also wanted to get used to it, thinking that one day we would come here again. We used to wear the great shrine's uniforms all the time, so I'm afraid that we could not get used to it from then on. The situation was similar to what they had imagined. It was just ridiculous. No wonder the manager of the Radiant Light headquarters had a strange expression when he mentioned it. He probably understood the situation after getting the information from Moot Songyuan. The headquarters and great shrines he mentioned were probably the headquarters and great shrines that only existed in the eastern region. As for the chaotic northern region and the suppressed southern region, they could forget about these two places. Well, although they did not need the help of others to act, having the help of the locals could indeed save them a lot of unnecessary trouble, allowing them to speed up their actions. Although they did not even have a more specific target now, it was just, well, they were also ridiculous. The top of the mountain was the passage to leave the small town. A wall made of crystal surrounded the place, leaving only two gates that were tens of thousands of feet high as the entrance and exit. At this moment, the left and right gates were both closed, but the right gate was not only closed, but also tightly bound with circles of seals. The place where the gate was located was a huge, empty space surrounded by a wall. Even the floor was not paved, and the wall and gate alone would not be able to stop anything. However, it only took a little closer look to see that there were a lot of energy barriers buried in the space here, sealing off the entire small town with this place as the center. The fleet was hovering above this place, with the shadow of the largest ship cast here. When one looked up from below, one would feel a strong sense of oppression. Coupled with the surging energy response from the ship, it should be able to deter many people who had other thoughts. At the very least, without breaking through the fleet's combat strength directly, no one would be able to think of such a thing. Apart from the fleet above, there were also teams of warriors armed to the teeth standing in front of the gates on both sides. A group of light chasers stood on the ground and on the walls. With such a tight defense, it was unlikely that they would be able to break through the blockade without a large force. Yin Nuoxing looked around and nodded calmly. It's actually very simple. Of course, we all know that breaking through here is very simple. Hui nodded in agreement. Then, his face darkened. But other than breaking through directly, can't you think of some, other ways? Sorry, I don't have such plans. Yin Nuoxing shook her head and gathered light in her hand. Look carefully, my sword is going over there. What are you doing here? A shout suddenly rang out, startling everyone. The little angel quickly stopped someone who was about to draw his sword. Everyone turned around and saw a soldier wearing a full set of light armor made of magic crystals walking quickly towards them. One of his hands was already on the hilt of the sword at his back, and the energy in his body began to surge as he shouted at them. Unauthorized personnel are not allowed to come near the gate. What are you all doing here? They exchanged a few words in half a second before Hui quickly smiled and said, We want to go to the northern region. I wonder if you can make it easy for us. The soldier, who seemed to be a captain, frowned. Do you have an amnesty pass? No. Hui scratched his head and laughed dryly. Didn't you say that we can pass as long as we pay a certain amount of magic crystals or purify magic stones? When did it become so troublesome? The soldier, who seemed to be the captain, sneered. Since a month ago, no one is allowed to pass through here without an amnesty pass. This has already been announced to everyone here. Did you come from somewhere else? Go back if you don't have a pass. This is the order. Even if you have urgent matters, you can't go back. Hui grimaced. Aya, be a good person and make an exception for us. We have been wandering outside for a long time and finally want to go home. Don't be so unreasonable. He faked a smile and took out the purifying demon stone used for storage and carefully stuffed it into Huey's hand. Look, this is our token of appreciation. If you can let us pass this extra cough cough. The captain glanced at the space within, his eyes flashing with surprise. Still, he threw it back to Hui with a cold glare and said coldly, "That's the order. You can't pass without an amnesty pass. If you don't leave." He snorted coldly and waved his hand, and the light chasers and other soldiers who were on standby immediately surrounded them. "Then I'm going to throw you out." Hui still had that fake smile on his face, but veins were already popping out on his forehead. Damn it. He cursed in his soul. I'm not going to bicker with him, phone. Leave his place too. Boom. Everyone was startled by the sudden burst of energy and a deafening rumble. As they looked towards the source of the sound, they saw a huge cluster of orange-red flames erupting from the gateway to the eastern domain. The fiery red light illuminated the sky as if a firework had been lit in the middle of the night, and a surging energy blast and shockwave knocked the light chasers and a group of soldiers who had just approached to the ground. The energy barriers hidden in the space were all revealed at once and began to ripple violently, with streaks of fissures appearing in an instant. The captain turned in shock the moment the energy burst occurred, and before he could see what was going on, he shouted by reflex, "Enemy attack! Someone's attacking the seal on the gateway. Sound the alarm. Have the nearby patrols come as reinforcements." The ear-piercing shriek of energy had already resounded even as he shouted, echoing incessantly within the past town and rapidly spreading even further away. The successive commotion left everyone in the past town stunned. As they looked at the orange-red flames that were blooming like fireworks, and then at the soldiers who were standing guard and patrolling nearby, they all understood what was going on and could not help but sigh. It had been a long time since anyone tried to attack the pass, and there was no telling how much of a ruckus it would cause this time. The captain had just finished shouting when he turned to look at Hui and the others. It just so happened that this group of people had arrived at the same time as the energy burst. It must have something to do with them. When he turned around, he was stunned. He saw a group of people lying on the ground in front of him. They looked like they had fainted. They were probably knocked out by the energy shock just now. But this was a little different from what he had expected. This situation, forget it. He didn't have time to care about them now. Listen to my orders. Attack with all you've got if anyone shows up. Life or death. Seeing the captain running away to command the battle, Hui raised his eyelids and glanced at the gate that had been blasted open by the shockwaves one after another. The energy barrier hidden behind was letting out a sorrowful cry as it struggled to hold on. He could not help but mutter in the soul message, "Phone, aren't you being too hasty?" Yin Nuashing was stunned. "Are you stupid? Don't you know me? If it were me, do you think the explosion would be so small? Even if I don't use the origin energy or annihilation energy to flood this place, I will use the origin energy to sink this place. Do you think I will use fire or ordinary flames? How about the energy blast of the origin energy transformed into the form of flames?" This seems like it. Hui was stunned for a moment and could not help but laugh dryly. Then what's going on? How could it happen just when we were chatting? Attack with all you've got. When everyone heard the captain shout, they sneakily raised their eyelids and saw that in the midst of the explosion of energy, it seemed like they could barely see 5 or 6 figures dancing and flying in the air, fighting with the captain and the entire fleet. With the background of the flames and their posture of prostrating themselves on the ground, it was a pretty good scene. I saw the old man walking his bird. See, you could not help but exclaim. Huey's face twitched. He took a closer look at the flashing figures in the flames. One of them was the old man walking his bird that he had just talked to. The bird on his shoulder was still spitting fire. The explosion was probably caused by it. Good heavens, we have become chess pieces. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and ended her inelegant posture of lying on the ground. She patted the dust off her body. They seemed to be about to succeed in breaking the seal. Let's help them. Let's go. Everyone stood up and patted the dust off. Hui suddenly opened his hand to her. She was stunned. What do you mean? Let me borrow your formation-breaking bow. Yin Nuoxing was silent for a moment. Then, she quietly condensed a 2-meter-long bow with energy and handed it to Hui. The latter immediately imitated her and gathered energy to knock an arrow. But just as he was about to release the arrow, he suddenly paused. Little Phoenix spit a mouthful of saliva to cover it up. Fengqing Wang was speechless. She quietly snapped her fingers and condensed an ordinary orange-red flame on his energy arrow. Then, everyone watched as Hui released the arrow. Boom! Boom! A towering energy firework suddenly erupted from the wall beside the main gate. The orange fireworks' fiery shockwave engulfed hundreds of light chasers and dozens of soldiers in a single breath, before being blown into the air by the wind. It seemed to have inadvertently engulfed one airship after another in a sea of flames, fusing with the flames that kept erupting over the main gate and strengthening the latter's power. The seal that had been holding on strenuously did not last more than a few seconds under the impact of the unexpected power that had burst out, before shattering with a bang. Bang! Hundreds of large cracks appeared on the wall that seemed to be made of crystal. In a brief instant, the wall shattered with a loud bang. The power of the explosion mixed with the energy storm, causing the flames to burn even more vigorously. Sir Bird and the others were stunned when they saw that. Although they had calculated that they could break through the blockade, they should not have done it so quickly. Still, they had no time to think too much. While the soldiers were engulfed by the explosion, they took the lead and rushed out of the main gate. Screw it. Let's get out of here first. The billowing flames had eaten the airships into chaos. When the captain turned and saw the figures rushing out of the main gate, he immediately roared, "Attack! Attack with all your might! Stop defending and attack with all your might. Don't let a single one live." Tens of thousands of airships instantly withdrew their energy barriers, allowing the strange and inextinguishable flames to spread rapidly across the airships. They gathered all their energy and turned it into a torrent of energy that surged towards the forests of the eastern region. The sound of destruction that shook the earth resounded through the sky. A huge mushroom cloud suddenly bloomed. The dazzling light took away the color of the sky and cast a grayish-white color. Countless people in the small town at the pass were so shocked that they patted their chests and whistled to pretend to be calm. The energy explosion that the entire fleet unleashed was enough to make a beginner Yuanshir's scalp tingle. If it was not for the fact that the explosion was concentrated, it would have cleansed the area within hundreds of millions of miles. Oh, what a splendid firework! We clapped his hands and looked at the mushroom cloud in the distance. He could not help but clap his hands. Then he turned back and said calmly, "The energy impact with the power of the rules is coming." Less than 2 seconds after he finished speaking, the energy impact came crashing down. A gust of wind with a force of tens of thousands suddenly blew past them. The group of people were as steady as Mount Tai, but the ground under their feet was immediately plowed. When I looked down, they found that the ground had sunk by 7 or 8 meters. The shadow of a small hill next to them had disappeared. Looking at the area affected by the shock wave, Yin Nuoxing turned around and looked in front of him. The flames at the entrance were still burning. Those people were trying their best to extinguish the flames. However, the flames of the phoenix were extinguished. Even if the flames were disguised as ordinary flames, they were still the flames of the blue phoenix. How could they be extinguished just because they wanted to? That's right, those people had just canceled their defenses and risked their lives to attack. This was simply like taking off their clothes and jumping into lava. Look at the flames burning. Yin Nuoxing said, "By the way, did you miss your arrow just now?" This. Huey's expression stiffened. After a moment, he coughed and turned his head. "I was shooting at the city wall." There was no problem at all. It was just a little off, right? Yes. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes. Why don't you just use divine shock? Well, let me do it. You can't handle my power. Mu Tsang-yin stared blankly at the sky in the distance that was already burning red. Then he looked at the ground behind him that had just been sunk by the shock wave. With a blank expression, he said, they just broke through qi and ran over here. Is it that simple? At this time, Lu Xiaoqiu recovered from her calm expression. She turned her head and said to them, calm down. As a mature spectator, you need to calm down. You're not used to their style of doing things. Sooner or later, your stomach will hurt. Mu Tsang-yuan and the others were speechless. They felt that this statement was very subtle. They stood in place and watched for a while. After confirming that the fire would not burn out in a short time, they decided to ignore it. Just as they were about to go deeper into the eastern region, a few figures suddenly appeared in front of them and stopped not far in front of them. They stumbled forward a few steps. Their clothes were tattered, and their hair was disheveled. It was the old man who was walking the bird. It seemed that even though they ran out with all their strength, they were still unable to block the angry attack of the fleet. As soon as the old man came out, he half knelt on the ground. He looked back at the few people who were in a sorry state. He gritted his teeth and hugged the fainted bird in his arms tightly. Just as he was feeling uneasy, he suddenly saw a group of people in front of him. His spirit was shaken, and he shouted at the people in front of him with all his might. Friends in front, please wait a moment. Please lend a hand and save us this time. We will definitely reward you after this. Hui, who had just turned his head and was about to leave, suddenly put on a sinister smile. He skipped and jumped all the way. Looking at his beaming face, he looked like a child who had lived for more than 10 years. Yin Nuoxing and the others felt a little helpless and could only follow him. When the person in front of him jumped and appeared in front of him, the old man who was walking the bird was also startled. Just as he was about to raise his head to see who it was, the person in front of him squatted down first. He put his hands on his knees and looked at the old man with his chin in his hands. He said cheerfully, "Uncle, long time no see." The old man listened to this slightly familiar voice that he seemed to have heard not long ago and could not help but be stunned. He looked up and saw Hui staring at him with a smile. He immediately widened his eyes in horror. "It's you. You. Why are you here? Why can't we be here?" Hui spread out his hands and shrugged. "What? Do you want to throw us away after using us as pawns? You and I, the guy who used us as tools and kicked us away after using us, are either a flower now or holding hands and reporting below." The old man's face turned pale in an instant. "All right, stop fooling around with them." Yin Nuoxing sighed softly and walked over. Seeing that the old man's face had turned pale, she could not help but shake her head and comfort him. "Don't listen to his nonsense. He just tore you in half and used it as fertilizer to plant grass. The grass on your grave is at least 1,000 feet tall." The old man and the others, they were finished. They had just escaped death, and now they were in a wolf's den. This group of people looked like Azura demons. If they had known this would happen, they would not have gotten involved with them. How could they randomly find a person on the road and be associated with such a group of monsters? All right, I won't scare you anymore. I was just joking." Hui clapped his hands and stood up. "Although you used us as pawns without saying anything, but seeing that you diverted their attention for us, and that you will be hunted down for a period of time in the future, I won't be too calculative. Tell me who you are, where you came from, and what you plan to do, and I will let you go. Hey, if you have resentment, just blame yourself. If you want to be angry, just be angry at yourself. Who asked you to run over here? Not only did you run over here, you even called us. Look, you are in our hands now. Isn't this very delightful?" No, it makes people want to play with you. What I mean is very exciting. It hurts." Yin Nuoxing stopped Hui, who was about to go crazy. She rolled her eyes and said bluntly to the 5 people who were already trembling with fear, "We lack a tour guide from the eastern region. Understand?" Understood. Chapter 2003. In the distant sky, they could still see that the blue curtain was dyed red by the raging fire. The billowing black smoke had drifted tens of thousands of miles away as time passed. The bastards in the northern region had spent a lot of effort to extinguish that unique flame, but they could not even extinguish it. They could not even put out the fire in their house, so they probably did not have the time to send people after them. This was a good thing, a very good thing, Lita thought. He then turned back and sneaked a peek at the group of people who were talking and laughing behind them. He could not keep a straight face, and even the servant on his shoulder was whispering softly in his ear. He seemed to be in a bad mood. Coincidentally, this group of people was not in a particularly good mood. They were from the eastern reaches and spent most of their time outside on special missions. It was common for them to be taken away from the northern reaches or the disunited southern reaches. In their line of work, they had to be very capable in all aspects and have the ability to endure. Roaming around in extremely dangerous places all year round, they would sooner or later be seriously injured. This was something that Lita had been mentally prepared for. For example, 20 years ago, the northern reaches suddenly sealed off the southern reaches and cut off their connection with the eastern reaches. They were forced to stay in the southern reaches and live near the eastern reaches for 20 years. During that time, they had all sorts of thoughts of breaking through the eastern reaches. But when he saw that the southern reaches who were more determined than them to go to the eastern reaches and failed to break through the eastern reaches, he temporarily suppressed his restlessness. It was only in recent years that he felt a little anxious and was in a hurry to return to the eastern reaches. He was not in a hurry if he was alone. It was not because there were other important people beside him that he was in a hurry to return to the eastern reaches. Urged by this sense of urgency, they had planned to break through the defense line in the next few days. It would not be a problem if they smashed the door, but the problem was that they would have to run away after smashing the door. No matter how fast they ran, there was no way they could outrun the airships that could travel to the ends of the earth as long as they had enough energy. However, time did not allow them to think more because they had no better ideas. They could only take one step at a time. Their plan was to take action by tomorrow at the latest. They would first cause some chaos in the town. As long as it was a little chaos, it would be enough to distract the guards for 2 to 3 seconds. However, they did not expect to meet a group of young people who suddenly planned to leave the town through the gate that had been sealed for several days. He immediately judged that there was no need to wait until tomorrow. This was the best opportunity to act. Well, now they had escaped. Although they were hit by a few cannons and almost died on the spot, they were fortunately saved by someone. Unfortunately, the ones who saved them were a group of people who looked like hotheads. It was very confusing. He did not expect that after so many years in the world, there would be times when he misjudged people. This group of people was able to sneak in while they were engaged in a fierce battle with the soldiers in the north. It was obvious that they were not weak. However, he could not determine where they came from. Yes, he had no impression of them at all. He had never seen them before. And now, this group of suspicious people told him that they were missing a tour guide in the eastern region. This was very confusing. He did not know what they wanted to do in the eastern region. He felt a little uneasy, and his head was throbbing. His long experience of carrying out missions in dangerous places told him that they might have encountered an unprecedented problem. They had invited a group of people who could kill them into the eastern region. From now on, whatever happened would have nothing to do with them. However, this was just a feeling. It was just a feeling, and he could not do anything to this group of people. After all, they were the ones who used them as pawns. He felt a little guilty and guilty. Now that they were saved by them, these two things added together made him even more speechless. He could only obediently lead the way and wait until they returned to the main hall to see what was going on. Yin Nuashing and the others had no idea what Uncle Reed was thinking about. Well, it could be said that they did not care at all. Anyway, from the way they kept turning back, and turning back again and again, sneakily sizing them up, it was obvious that Uncle Reed and his companions had a ton of questions. However, since they did not speak, he did not intend to speak either. It was just a matter of who could not hold it in first. They were definitely not in a hurry. Nothing in this world could be rushed, except for those two trivial matters. At this moment, they were chatting with little Qing Zi about what happened during the mission. At present, they already knew that the people from the Tianxian world were in the eastern region, assisting the people from the Great Shrine in the battle. The people from the primordial world were gathered in the northern region. Little Qing Zi and Shu Qing had already contacted and asked about some things. It was said that the latter and her friends got involved in the battle between the two major regions under very subtle circumstances. They accidentally got involved and kept getting involved. As for how it got involved, it seems that when it fell from the sky, it happened to collide with the largest ship in the northern region. The energy of the explosion blew the entire fleet to smithereens on the spot. Little Qing Zi's expression was very subtle when he said this. When he was still in a daze, he and the guy who called himself Monitor were taken away by the people in the eastern region. Now, they have been in the frontline team and are being treated quite well. It is said that in a few years, they can use the method of this world to enter the realm of Yuanshi. And Hui did distinguish between them. When they broke into this space, they were indeed wrapped in various kinds of energy. However, because they landed in a godforsaken place, the energy concentration was too low. They did not manage to deal with the energy wrapped in their bodies, so it leaked out automatically. As for Shu Qing and the others, well, not only did they use the most enthusiastic method to consume the energy, but they also accidentally overturned the ship in the northern region and became the hero of a battle in the eastern region. Congratulations, congratulations, this guy is quite lucky. Speaking of the method of entering the realm of Yuanshi in this world, Hui was more excited than anyone when it came to this. What is the method? Is it special? Is it effective? What is the success rate? The method of obtaining? There is no need to ask. It is using the power of will. Yin Nuoxing glanced at him and interrupted him with an answer. The power of will and consciousness is related to the power of the root of this world. Therefore, it can be guessed without even thinking. Zi's soul scratched his head. It is indeed the case. It is using the power of will. The reason why it takes a few years is that he needs to get used to the power of will first. Whether it is the people in the Yuanshi world or the Tianxian world, they have never used the power of will. After trying to get used to it, they could try to enter the realm of Yuanshi. However, it still depends on the situation. The success rate is also a problem, and the success rate is not very high. Therefore, even if there are people in the realm of Yuanshi in this world, there are not many of them. However, I heard that Shu Qing's success rate seems to be quite high. The position at the back is still okay. Yin Nuoxing's face twitched a few times when she saw this. She sighed helplessly and said, "All right, even if you dig out your eyes and stuff them into my soul, I will not be able to break through. Save it. The destruction of the divinity carrier and the loss of the life course cannot be repaired without a certain amount of time. They can't do anything to me. Do you think the advancement method of a strange world can help me?" Oh, that's true. Hui suddenly became like a frosted eggplant. He really didn't want to give up. He just wanted to see Feng enter the realm of Yuanshi. This had almost become his obsession. However, this matter was really difficult. But I really don't want to give up. Feng, quickly enter the realm of Yuanshi. Yin Nuoxing was even more depressed than Hui. Her pretty face was wrinkled into a walnut shape. She looked pained. I want to. I am also very depressed. Hui grimaced. He was only dazed for a few seconds before he immediately found another topic to talk to little Qing. Speaking of which, have you found a reason for the war between the North and the East? Well, I haven't found out anything yet. It seems to be a simple dispute over territory. I Ching scratched his head. Based on the development of the situation, it seems that a powerful force is not satisfied with their current achievements, so they started to expand and go on expeditions. This is also the situation in this large region. Large and small territories are all fighting from scratch. They also have a history of resisting the demonized beings, but more of a history of fighting among themselves. Oh, this is basically the South and the West. The East belongs to the Great Shrine from the very beginning, so there are no internal conflicts. There are news of other places fighting with them, such as the North and the South. But these histories are quite recent. They can only be traced back to 10 or 20,000 years ago. I haven't found anything earlier than that. Oh, Lord Hui, these things remind me of the years when we first went on expeditions in the celestial realm. Yes, the expeditions felt a little familiar. In those years, they were not the forces that represented the celestial realm. They were just one a large group of forces that were still inconspicuous. He was not the guardian back then, and Maple was not the observer back then. However, Maple's battles were terrifying from beginning to end. During those years of fighting, they would occasionally have some free time to wander around the celestial realm to relax and relax. During those years of fighting, they would have to run around and shout until they broke their legs to gather manpower. During those years of fighting, the battles were not as dangerous as they were now. During those years of fighting, they did not try to mix with other life forms. We, the people of the celestial realm, are very principled. Internal strife is internal strife. External strife is external strife. It's their business to fight amongst themselves. Outsiders have no right to interfere. If a group of outsiders dared to take advantage of the chaos, to fight their way into the celestial realm, everyone would gather and scatter their ashes. So these guys even brought demonized beings into the fray. What the hell is going on? He coughed twice to suppress his excitement. This should be the situation on the surface. Is there any information that is not on the surface? Not at the moment. I Ching shook his head helplessly. There's nothing going on in the east at all. The north hasn't been infiltrated yet either. As far as we know, this battle has been going on for more than 100 years, and it's still not even 100 years. It's been going on for more than 100 years, which is about 300 years in the Great Primordial Realm's time. Currently, the eastern region's sphere of influence is shrinking bit by bit. They can't beat the northern region, after all, and the northern region is completely unreasonable. Everyone was shocked. Yin Nuashing immediately added, so when you said you saw demonized beings on the battlefield, it's actually the northern region who dragged demonized beings into the battlefield? Yes, there's a lot of them. It looks like they're cooperating with the demonized creatures to attack the city. Well, that's pretty fierce. Yep, really fierce. The eastern region is also quite fierce. They withstood this kind of attack for about 100 years, and they've only lost 1/10 of their territory. They haven't suffered any serious injuries, and they're still able to maintain a relatively stable momentum and continue fighting. They're also very powerful. Other than the fact that they don't have enough core strength, they don't have any other flaws. The lack of core strength is their biggest flaw. There's really nothing that can be done about this. If it's a clash between a veteran force and a new force, one of the two will definitely die, and from the looks of it, it's most likely going to be the eastern region. As for why the northern region can control the demonized beings, well, we don't know for the time being. They don't avoid the demonized beings at all when they fight. Those brainless bastards also don't have any incidents of friendly fire. They only target those from the eastern region and beat them up. It's just, I don't know how to put it, it's full of mysteries. Well, after all, it's their biggest trump card, and it's their trump card that's always on the battlefield. If we can figure it out so easily, they won't be able to do anything about it. That's true. When the two factions of completely different natures come together, it's as ridiculous as order and chaos shaking hands and making peace. There must be some reason behind it that caused level 3 burns. Anyway, let's investigate it first. We scratched his head. By the way, are all of you involved in this battle? No, a third of the people are with me in the eastern region. The rest are scattered all over this large area. Half of them are in the northern region, and the other half are in other places. As for the situation here, it's the same as what I just said. The northern side is using their demonized life forms as the vanguard to press on. With the help of the people from the primordial world, their power has increased exponentially. On the eastern side, the people from the heavenly mystic world are also fighting very hard, but they are still lacking. We have not used our full strength to suppress them, so the eastern side is still retreating bit by bit. However, The battle situation has already fallen into a ditch when we got involved. As long as you give the order, we can flatten the northern region within a day. Not for the time being. Yin Nuoxing raised her head. What about the people from the other two factions? Chang Yuan and Saint Spirit World. Where are they? I haven't seen them. I don't know where they are. I Ching put on a distressed expression and shook his head. I haven't seen them since the beginning. I don't know if they are hiding in a corner and waiting to reap the benefits. We have tried our best to look for them, but we haven't found any traces yet. Let's wait and see. It's not a problem whether the two factions are here or not. Yin Nuoxing let out a long breath. Just as little Qing said, when they planned to get involved, the so-called battle situation was not a problem. Compared to the outcome of the battle, what they needed to find now was how to end it. As mentioned before, there was no need for such a meaningless battle. The threat of the demonized beings was still in front of them. It would be ridiculous if these people still had the mood to fight among themselves. Oh, the people from a northern region seem to be able to coexist with the demonized beings. The demonized beings are not a threat to them. They probably don't have to worry about survival. Speaking of which, can they persist in an environment created by the demonized energy? We glanced at Maple, who was deep in thought. He raised his head and looked into the distance. They did not take out the ship at this time. They were just flying. The speed was not slow, but it was much slower than the speed of the airship. They had been flying for several hours. Is there anything else? Nothing for now. We're still figuring it out. No, there's more. I Ching suddenly remembered something. He quickly coughed and said, I accidentally overheard it. I think it was the manager of the headquarters at the front line. I mean the commander here. When they were talking about something, they mentioned that so-and-so seemed to have disappeared from other regions for many years. It was said that so-and-so was the reason why the eastern region could hold on for about 100 years. I don't know what the current situation is, but it should be a relatively important person. When little Qing Zi brought up this topic, Yin Nuoxing and the others couldn't help but raise their heads to look. Looking at the five fellows flying ahead in a hurry, Siyu thought for a moment, then suddenly shouted to the front, Hey, how many years have you guys been away from the eastern region? Li Da and the others were startled. They looked back at Siyu, who was full of curiosity. About 20 years. Why? Oh. Siyu nodded and rolled her eyes. Can I still be a tour guide after 20 years? Li Da and the others were speechless. Uncle Bird's face twitched. He coughed and said, Don't worry. We are very familiar with the eastern region. Even in the current situation, we can still give you some good directions. This girl was trying to get information out of him. The timing was just right. The location 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 was just right. If little Qing said that there was no relationship between them, well, there's no need to say that there must be a relationship. Let's wait and see. The girl in the plain long dress turned around and stared at the group. She frowned slightly and tried to talk to them for the first time. Where are you going? She asked. Where are you going? Yin Nuoxing and the others looked at each other for a while. They nodded and came up with an answer. Hui then conveyed their intention. He also sounded a little probing. The war zone. The place where Twilight and the eastern region are fighting. We're going there. Sure enough, the faces of the five people suddenly changed. Except for the girl, the rest of the four people had a faint sense of vigilance in their eyes. Hui pretended not to feel the subtle change in the atmosphere and continued, Our friends are fighting for their lives over there, so we plan to go over and support them. Hey, those guys are really worrying. I lost contact with them for a while, but I didn't expect them to be involved in this battle. What a worrisome guy. Yin Nuoxing said, If we had not used a unique method known to each other, we might still be wandering around in the south. So, do you know the direction to the war zone? Oh, if you don't know, just take us to the nearest foothold. We will find our own way. Siyu covered her forehead with a headache and gloominess. I don't know how they are doing. It should be fine. It has been dozens of days since we last contacted them. It should be fine. Little Star, are they okay? You ask me? How would I know? That is the war zone. We have not contacted them for dozens of days. Maybe. Sigh, I hope they are okay. At least one of them should be left behind so that we can see what is going on. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly. Why do you think they are suddenly involved in the war zone between two regions? Hui scratched his head with a confused look. Even if they are running around blindly, they shouldn't be running around like that. Oh, God knows. Act with all your might. Act however you can. The Celestial Realm Actors Troupe will act with all their might. Regardless of whether you believe it or not, they will act. Lida and the other four furrowed their brows slightly when they saw the worried look on their faces. For a moment, they couldn't tell if these people were telling the truth or not. The main thing was that these people's origins and identities were too suspicious. It was already suspicious that they came from the southern region, but they couldn't find any clues to identify them. Although there were people from the southern region who joined the eastern region in the past, they were actually non-staff members. The essence of the eastern region was still the same group of people from the eastern region. It wasn't that they were xenophobic, but when it came to people who had forgotten their original origins, they didn't know what kind of expression to put on when they mentioned them. Forget it. For the time being, they did not have the strength to distinguish between the good and the bad. They were going to the war zone anyway, so it was not a problem to bring them along. After all, there was nothing they could do once they were there. However, it was worrying that they could not find any clues. Even if they could tell that they were from the north, it would be less of a wild imagination. Acting was acting, but being stared at with such strange eyes for a long time. They had been stared at all the way. Yin Nuashing still felt very uncomfortable. Well, if you have something to say, just say it. Don't stare at me with such eyes. It always makes me think of a lot of strange things. Lord Bird coughed awkwardly. Mainly, this is a special time, so, ahem. He then changed to a more serious tone. Anyway, thank you for saving us this time. As you wish, we will bring you to the war zone between the two regions. Oh, Yin Nuashing responded. After Lord Bird finished speaking, the expressions of the others changed slightly. But this time, he intended to get straight to the point. Although I don't know what you are thinking and worried about, if you are thinking about us, there is no need to. Mu Songyuan. He turned back to look at Mu Songyuan and the others. The latter and the others immediately understood and took out the uniform of the Great Shrine and put it on. Then they nodded at the few people who were staring at them and did something in unison. It was probably the salute of the people of the Great Shrine, or was it a special gesture for identification? You are also members of the Great Shrine? Li De and the others widened their eyes when they saw the familiar clothes and the movements. Their hearts were filled with mixed feelings. At least when the clothes were taken out, they believed 2/3 of it. Li De smiled bitterly. Then what were we doing before this? How would I know what you were doing? You were the one who made the first move. We crossed his arms and said rudely. See, now it's awkward, isn't it? The 5 of them turned their heads away awkwardly. Well, it's all a misunderstanding. Lord Bird coughed and looked embarrassed. Anyway, it's my fault. I was the one who brought it up. That's enough. It's not a big deal. Hui waved his hand indifferently. But if you had told us earlier, it would have been more convenient for us to take action. We wouldn't have had to take advantage of the chaos when you guys were stirring up trouble. We wouldn't have had to restrain ourselves for fear of affecting you guys. Sure enough, the sudden energy explosion was caused by you. The girl in the long dress had a look of realization. She said softly, "We are the managers of the Great Shrine of the Eastern Region, the supreme commander of the frontline war. We had to go there personally because of a special mission more than 20 years ago." We understood. It was just as they had guessed. Is it really okay for the commander-in-chief to go out personally? When he said that, he smiled bitterly. Maple also rolled his eyes at him. They were also the commander-in-chief of the Void Frontline. They also led people out every day. Why did they have to criticize others? Because of the importance of the matter, we had to go out personally. Before we left enough preparations to deal with the situation. But we didn't expect to be trapped in the South for 20 years. Reed sighed helplessly. Important. Yin Nuashing crossed her arms and thought for a moment. Could it be related to the northern region's ability to control the demonized beings? That's right. Lord Bird nodded. They didn't control the demonized beings from the beginning. In fact, hundreds of thousands of years ago, they were still under the Great Shrine like us. At that time, there was only the eastern region and the western region of the chaotic lands. You should know the specifics, so I won't go into detail. Let's talk about the things that might not be known to the public. Everyone, no, we don't know anything. Don't skip it. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.